think that it's advisable for students who are interested in joining the field of fintech to attend a lot of programs that, centered on fintech or are centered on law and technology and things like that? My apologies, Mr. Arrow. It appears you're muted.
I was speaking to mute. Yeah, I think it's particularly important for students to attend programs around fintech and technology, especially because, as I said, I'm not so sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, there may be no schools that actually teach that in your curriculum. And you really don't have any idea what it entails. And the only way you start to understand and begin to even start to grasp the idea of fintech is when you attend these programs. You see speakers talk about them, and you start to conceptualize most of these things. Because unlike a lot more areas of law, because I seem to my beginnings phase of in the legal career, I sort of started off with doing a lot more than just fintech. So I did practice other areas of law, and you realize that fintech is a bit more complex than others because it's not clear cut, and it's just like technology, it changes over time. It's a new area of law, and it mutates, it keeps changing, licenses are evolving, the regulations on it are evolving. So as a student that wants to go into this area, you need to constantly understand programs. You need to join. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes. Okay. You need to attend programs. You need to join sessions so you keep abreast with what is going on in the space.
Thank you so much, Mr. R. Mr. Desmo, we would also like to ask you the same question. What was your motivation for going into the field of fintech?
Hi, good morning and good morning, everybody. It was a matter of problem solving. I enjoy complex problems and providing solutions. And at the time, when I was done with university and I was awaiting results for law school, I had two options in front of me. I could either become a software engineer or just focus on tech advisory as a lawyer. I decided I was going to practice law for a year at the initial time, do an NYC associate and then just try to development. But I realized that I actually enjoyed, breaking down financial regulations more than I enjoyed tackling engineering problems, even though I was quite good at that also because I was taking classes. And so ultimately, I just decided that fun. So I stuck with fintech. That's consistently been interesting. You sort of, Arrow is right. You sort of have hack things by yourself. There is no one-stop shop to go and look for answers from. A lot of times you'd have to find the answers by yourself because there is no one that can provide the answers to you. And I guess that's what makes fintech so exciting for me. And also, Ara had mentioned that there's no single textbook that you can pick up and whatnot. Don't worry, we are working on that. I and Mr. Oturu are currently writing a textbook on fintech law and practice in Nigeria. It's almost done. So maybe by the end of the year, it will be published. And then new guys that want to become experts in fintech will not have to suffer through what I and Ara suffered.
Thank you so much, Mr. Desmo. This is actually a personal question because both you and Mr. Arrow keep mentioning problem solving, and it seems like I just want to clarify. There's this misconception that lots of lawyers go into law because they're trying to avoid mathematics, so they're trying to avoid calculations and things like that. So do you think fintech is a field that you have to do a lot of technical work, you have to do a lot of calculations, a lot of mathematics, things like that?
So you don't have to do a lot of technical work. You don't have to do a lot of mathematics, to be honest. But you do have to understand a lot of technical terms. You need to understand how technology plays out in practice. So there's a concept under EU law called same risk, same matter, same regulation. It means that when regulators are approaching a matter, when they want to regulate something, they don't focus on the technology behind the thing they're trying to regulate. They focus on the risk inherent in what it produces. They focus on how does this affect the market? What's the investor risk in this particular operation? So when you're looking at fintech, for example, you have to look at what exactly is this technology doing? How does it play out in practice? So you spend a lot of time in the beginning, spend a lot of first and about how they want to have this open banking solution that conveys consent and authentication. I like, what are these guys saying? So I mean, for me, I don't think you need a lot of maths to be honest. I haven't had reason to do a lot of maths except a few instances where you're doing litigation, where you're doing arbitration rather, where you have to confirm the amount you're claiming from fraudulent transfers that was caused by a bank or something. But you do have to understand technical things. You must be willing to sit down with things and you play YouTube videos to understand what these technical things are. You call your guys in the field to understand what these technical things are. So just out in practice to understand what's the likely treatment that the regulator will give this thing. That's it from me. I don't know if
So is that your advice on how to learn those technical things, watching YouTube videos, meeting with your friends, trying to get advice from people in that field?
Yes. So
do you think it's necessary to major in that course? Do you think it's necessary to major in fintech or in something related so that you can understand how it really works?
So you don't have to major in something, especially because as a lawyer in the fintech space, you are going to be working on too many things simultaneously for you to even have time to major on a specific thing. But you do have to have a network of people that you can reach out to give you a basic outline of what these technological terms mean. Like so reading is a very good idea. Like I read a lot of textbooks on fintech. I think my best text on fintech is more written by Stephen Leoch. He works with the EU. It works in the EU. A lot of my references will be in the EU because I think they are very advanced and whatnot. You realize very quickly that reading might not be a very efficient way of always finding the answers. Sometimes it is better to just call someone and have them explain it to you first, then you read up on it to confirm that they did not give you jazz. But if you try to read up on it before someone explains to you, sometimes you sort of get lost in all the technical details because there'll be references and cross references and cross references and cross references. So for me, in terms of do you need to, be a tech person to be a fintech lawyer, the straight up answer is no. But do you need to know people in the tech space? Do you need to have an understanding of the concept? The answer is yes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Desimon. Mr. Arrow, we would like to know what exactly are the roles of a lawyer in this field? What exactly does a lawyer do in the fintech industry? Is it litigation? Is it helping to review contracts, review regulations?
Okay, what a lawyer does. So, so really, of course, the first set of things you have to do is typically draft contracts between parties. Take for instance, you're advising a payment gateway or you're advising a digital bank. They'll typically have to draft. Sorry? Okay, so you typically have to draft contracts between different parties. You draft the technical integration agreement. There are a couple of transactions, a lot of contracts you typically have to draft. The payment gateway agreement between the merchant and the payment gateway itself, the merchant acquirers agreement, all those, you typically have to draft all those agreements. And additionally, because they are technology companies, there are instances where it's not an agreement, so to speak, it's a terms and condition. So all those instances where you have to, because you have to bind your user to some sort of contract with you, and that contract is only formulated when the user accepts your terms and conditions on your app. So in those instances, you then have to draft your terms and conditions. So all those terms and conditions you don't typically skip. They're usually drafted by technology lawyers. In some instances, you then have to, if you are also doubling as a privacy expert. You then have to do a little bit of privacy policy and what have you. But a large extent of my work always centered around product advisory, because most times you come to market, a company comes to market, and what they want to do, the company knows what they want to do, all right, but they don't know how it's going to play out in the Nigerian regulatory terrain. You don't know how you're going to play out. You don't know the license you need to acquire. You don't know how you're going to have to route the money to make sure that you do not breach any extant regulations. So my work typically centers around that advisory, product advisory on how you can go to market in line with the current extant laws. But generally, these are the things that is expected of a technology lawyer.
Thank you so much, Mr. R. The participants would like to know, does these functions, do they apply to all lawyers in tech, or is it just solely to fintech lawyers?
So personally, I really don't like when people segment fintech. I like being referred to as a technology lawyer generally, because I advise across board. I'm not limited. So fintech is just an angle of technology law. It's just the angle of technology law that focuses on providing finance or generally that intersects with the finance sector. But I believe that for a lawyer, it's always more it's only most advisable for you to center yourself as a technology lawyer, so you can then cut across various areas. Because take for instance, we all see what's going on with AI, and with the rapid growth of AI, certainly there's going to be a lot more work coming on from that angle. And if you focus yourself as just a fintech lawyer, you typically you won't have any standing in that area. So personally, I prefer being referred to as a technology lawyer. But to answer your question directly, I think it cuts across both areas, because what you need to do is respect to as a technology lawyer. So, but when you are
I apologize, Mr. Aru. It appears your connection has stopped working. Oh, I believe it's my connection that's not working.
I can't hear or sing either, so I don't.
Okay, you can't hear him either. Thank you so much.
Okay, maybe when
I
when you
believe
get
yes. So while we're waiting for him to reconnect and to hear the complete answer to his question, we'll just come back to you, Mr. Desimu. So do you think it was difficult for you to break into the field of fintech? Do you think it would be difficult for any upcoming lawyer right now to break into the field of fintech? And
ask.
what skills do you have to actually break into this field? Sorry.
So was it difficult to break? It wasn't. So for me, from sending applications to join as an NYSL associate, that was very clear that I am open to, learning across the board first. So let's get this out of the way, right? So my application was very clear. My interviews are also very clear that, and so I think what I want to focus on is on tech and new instructions, emerging markets really. So I mean, all the offers were firms that had a lot of focus on fintech and technology. So it wasn't difficult to get so, and then immediately I got my foot into the door, I sort of started consolidating. So I started practicing in 2021. November, December, I was just trying to understand life after life as an employee was. Then from 2022, I had a lot of articles on various matters of tech. At the end of 2022, I left my previous firm. I joined a new firm. I joined BNI. I spent my 2023 writing a textbook or two on fintech plan practice, while also before working on regulatory policy for and regulators. So that sort of have a guide that can be provided for maybe AU might adopt, same way EU has a very beautiful ecosystem. So it wasn't difficult for me to get in. Since I got in, I have consistently put in effort to it. So do I think it would be difficult for other people to get in what they need? I don't think it would be difficult really. I think it's a question of do you want this? Like when the mind is willing, you find your way. So you'll be at player and you'd actually have to show that this is something. You'd have to have track record to show that this is an area you've explored and you're open to learning more in this area. Because I mean, I was going to correct you earlier when you had called me an expert because my one standard I'm not. I'm still largely learning. So for example, I was updating the text yesterday and someone had mentioned that Bitcoin was not actually the first cryptocurrency. I never heard that. I had to go back and go and check and found out predecessors to Bitcoin, and then I also cross-checked, which again is why I think you need a lot of grit in fintech. I also cross-checked the predecessors to Bitcoin cannot actually be considered cryptocurrencies for various reasons, and then I had to respond to someone. This is what the position is, and Bitcoin is still like the first cryptocurrency because it was sort of a pinpoint on the particular matter in any case. I don't think it's a bit difficult to come into this space, provided you show it. You just don't take things like consistently. I mean, it's so tiring and frustrating that God Almighty, where does this thing end? There are times when the get so complicated, they're like, why can't I just go and do company secretary or something where the answer is just one section? But again, so no shade to company secretary, for example, know exactly what you're looking for to look at the answers. But ultimately, it's a question of passion. And I don't know if it's obvious, but I'm very passionate about this. Yeah, so that's it for me. I think you just need.
Because you say you're not an expert, but compared to everyone here, we think you are very much an expert compared to us.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
A follow-up question concerning something you said before. You said that you think the EU is more has more of a foothold in fintech compared to other places. So do you think getting an education somewhere there, or like doing a master's in fintech there, would be preferable than getting one in Nigeria?
Definitely, like absolutely. The EU has a very like that things in Nigeria. Work in Nigeria, and you just shake your head that, come on, man. I think the EU has a framework. I think they have a better grasp of what they're trying to do. So, for example, they have something called asset regulation, creates an expansive, right? And then the ESB.
My point is, Mr. Duslo, I didn't quite get what you said they have. They have something called
The Market in Crypto Asset Regulation, MICA.
MICA.
MICA sets out a framework for regulating cryptocurrency, and then the ESB has various guidelines on various matters. So they have one on reverse registration, they have one in classifying crypto assets as financial whatnot. So there is an obvious and consistent step towards regulating crypto assets, a very deliberate and intentional and expansive effort. On the other hand, if you look at a jurisdiction like Nigeria, for example, in 2017, 2018, the SEC and EFCC all statements warning of the dangers of the currency, for example. In 2020, the SEC published a statement where it sort of gave the impression that it wanted to regulate cryptocurrencies. That was the statement on digital assets, interpretations, and treatment. The CBN, quote unquote, banned cryptocurrency. Then they published an interesting document where they gave their reasons, very interesting reasons. Then in 2022, SEC publishes the digital asset rules. 2022 upward to 2024, SEC has not registered digital asset rules. Then last month, SEC publishes the ARIP framework that's supposed to act as a stopgap for VASPs. Previously, in March, they had published an updated rules or proposed updated rules. It's scattered. The CBN VASP account guidelines it's concerning. Like if you look at what that guideline is saying and you understand what the technology is going to do in practice, you just say this will not work, right? So I think that EU has a better approach, especially because they are very consistent. They are very clear on this is what our general idea is. Market participants should come and make contributions. Maybe the easiest way to phrase this is to say that in 2019, the SEC had published a fintech roadmap. That roadmap, in my opinion, is the best approach to regulating fintech because they actually called experts. It's what could be reworked and whatnot, and they did a very comprehensive document and published same. But since that 2019, the subsequent regulations just seem rushed. Like I don't know how to put it very succinctly. You need to actually confirm in the field to know what is wrong. So, for example, I'm instruction where sort of reviewing some legislations, and then after we are sending the drafts, we have to the regulators and say, guys, what do you think about this? After the regulators, they called in professional bodies in the field and said, guys, what do you think about this proposal? You look at what everybody has said, look at okay, this is what we will work best. That is how you build regulations. Because you can't know it all. You need to actually involve people outside of your circles that you have a comprehensive piece of legislation that addresses the market risk you're trying to address without putting innovations in risk. That's my idea. So that framework, honestly.
So, concerning what you said, if I understood you correctly, you said the CBN made cryptocurrency illegal in 2019, I believe.
I said would ban cryptocurrency.
They banned cryptocurrency, and okay, please continue.
So the reason I'm using quote unquote was not an outright ban. All CBN said is that, look, guys, that's banks and OFIs can't deal in cryptocurrency on those accounts. So in effect, you're banning matter of fact, what else that cryptocurrencies are not illegal in Nigeria because CBN cannot buy a circular directing bank currency, then say that. So I'm very careful. I'm very careful to that the ban is not a direct ban. It's a
Okay, thank you. That clarified it for me. Mr. So I believe you are back online.
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So we would just like to ask you, do you think the postgraduate degree is essential in your field? Do you think it's necessary to master in something or get like something concerning financial technology or get a doctorate, something similar? Do you think it's necessary or it's good but not necessary?
I think it's good, but it's not necessary. So I've worked with a lot of exceptional lawyers over my few years practicing law, a lot of exceptional lawyers, and most of them do not have master's degree. Sometimes it's good to do a master. It's probably it gets to a point in your career you realize that you need to do it, not necessarily because you don't know the law, but for purposes of growing your career, you need to have a master's degree. All right. But in terms of your knowledge of fintech, it does not affect your knowledge. I feel what is more important over time, what is more important is your experience. So once you accumulate a number of experience, you know how to juggle these things over time. I don't think a master's degree is too important that you can't do it. You have to get it. No, I don't think so.
So even if a master's degree is not necessary, do you think that upcoming lawyers should go straight into fintech? Or do you think that they should try to practice more generally first before they enter into the specialized field?
Okay. Thank you for this question because I actually had to answer this question yesterday, and I was speaking to some interns. So, yes, I think that personally, it's a personal view. I think that if you're as a young lawyer, you're going to the space, do not specialize direct immediately. Do not specialize immediately. I feel you need to get a lot of experience. That's what I did. My first year, I did a lot of litigation, a whole lot of litigation. Um, I did I did corporate governance. I did a lot of things, but just subsequently I then started to dovetail into fintech, and I feel that that's what everybody should do because I feel it gives you a brighter. It doesn't narrow your thinking in terms of considering because the truth is that you cannot deal with law as a single a narrow road because Abola would also confirm that there's some areas of advisory you need to do, and you just see you're moving from fintech, you're moving to tax, and from tax you're moving into, and you just wonder, okay, what's going on? And sometimes might need to pull in experts in other areas of law that, oh, please come and help me, what's going on here? And if you are so narrow-minded and you say just fintech, once you get to those areas of law, you become lost. You don't know what to do. And the truth is that you are a lawyer. Lawyer should at least have an idea of almost everything. So I feel your first year, at least your first year, you should try as much as possible to grasp knowledge from every area of law, as much as possible. Then subsequently, maybe your second year, your third year, you can then start to say, oh, I want to dovetail into fintech. I just want to specialize into fintech. I want to specialize into technology. I want to do all this. But I feel for your first year, it's very important. You need to do a lot more.
Okay, so I I also have another question that's really similar to that. So do you think these upcoming lawyers should go to a law firm or should work in-house? So in-house in a firm that specializes in fintech or in a law firm that specializes in fintech, which one would be better in line with that?
Again, this is my personal opinion. I maybe I'm being biased. Maybe I've only worked in a law firm. So I started off in a law firm. I'm still in a law firm at the moment. And personally, I feel that as a young lawyer, you need a law firm experience. Now, this is my reason. A law firm gives you varieties. They have a lot of things you're doing. You're not just you're not just advising a payment gateway. From payment gateway, they're pulling you to cryptocurrency. From cryptocurrency, they're pulling you into something else. So you have to be able to, it's different things you're advising on. There's no guarantee that the next transaction is going to be similar. It might just be a whole lot different thing. So that's typically how it's been. That's how it's been for a law firm, especially a very busy law firm. And I advise that as a young lawyer, start with a very busy emphasis on very not the one that you just sit up and you're not doing anything. Because the whole idea is for you to gather a lot of experience. So start with a very, very busy law firm. Some instances you might want to go into a core fintech company, like you talk of the InstaSwitch, the Flutterwave, those are the pioneers in the fintech industry. And you want to work directly in those ones. I might not feel that might be a bad idea because you will be getting a lot more experience. And this time it's not just going to be just legal experience. You then have to be working closer with the technical guys. So it's not just law, like in a law firm, what we do just the main law. And sometimes when you get into a very tight corner, you then have to call maybe one of your friends that, oh, please help me, what's this? Then, but in this instance, you're working with all these technical, all these pioneers in the fintech space. You work closer with your tech team, and in those instances, you then have a lot more practical experience. So it's not any of, so it depends on my own beliefs that if you're going to a law firm, make sure it's going to be a very busy law firm. And if you're going to going in-house, make sure you're not just one that is just sitting on the shelf. Make sure one that's busy. You're going to be doing a lot of things because what is more important to you is the experience you're gathering.
Thank you so much, Mr. R. So to check if this is the general consensus or if it's your personal bias like you believe, I'm going to ask Mr. Dosumu to see if he feels the same. Mr. Josumo, do you think a law firm or an in-house company would be preferable for new lawyers?
Yeah, I think I would first do a bit of back question of should you specialize from the get.
Of course,
That's
Mr. Josumo.
that matter is out of your hands. Very top firm, they're going, that's just the truth of it. They'll put you across different things. But you can make it sense your preference, which would then mean when you're retained, you will retain your preferred. When it meets you, it probably puts you to various aspects of top firm or many are going to get just kind of break that. Right? So I think that one is out of your hands. And with respect to either joining a firm or a fintech, I am as biased as Arif is. I think that you need to join because so I have house right, and they have to reach out to me to provide guidance inside. So there's just very few people you can reach out. Where is the tax contribution? Just walked up to Mohammed. I've done the advice for these guys and they're asking for tax contribution. Please give me how many things I should look in. And he gave me insight and he took a very few minutes and then I was yeah. So that's giving insight on this thing. So it makes your work really law firm. If you're in-house, you get a lot of practical experience. You get a lot more.
My apologies, Mr. Josumo. There are a lot of breaks in your answer, so we can't really hear
Anything
hear
is
you.
embarrassing.
My apologies.
What's the last thing you heard?
The last thing I heard was you were talking about meeting a colleague on tax compliance, something around
Yes,
that.
you have a lot more legal experience. You have a lot more legal connection. You have to just explain legal concepts to you. So that you're very efficient in your work. But if you are in-house, you get a lot more practical experience of the field, but not enough legal experience. So I think them and then try, especially because law firm will make you at 4 p.m. closed.
Okay, so we have a question from a participant, and he wants to know if how the traditional financial industries feel about fintech. So how do banks, how do the former moguls of the financial industry, how do they now feel about fintech that's coming in to take all their jobs?
So I think it's that fintechs are taking
Sorry, Mr. Josumo. We can't
MTN.
hear you at all.
Let me- I think I always have network in my kitchen. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
I was saying the banks level. So at that point, there was no conflict, there was no fight between fintechs and banks. In fact, services that they either won't various reasons, maybe have the agility, not big change for them in terms of profit and whatnot. Where you have currency, those ones are the ones that sort of have a bit of risk, to banks. So for example, if you are doing international transactions, if you have to pick between crypto and international bank, when you pick like in transaction. But still and text in terms of volume, in terms of profitability. There's a bit of an exception in Nigeria. But outside of that, you have guys like GT Bank with their GT Stripe and their GT POS and their MPOS. So we can create a subsidiary providing fintech services, right? And then this fintech subsidiary will tap the tech market. But for a fintech, the capital outlay alone is expensive that most times they have to partner with a bank, which is again risky. One day we them in a bank that I mean there's no values, right? But I think banks still have a significant edge, especially anything can happen anytime. But sure has happened to your Kuda. I still have a bit of preference for banks because of their tradition. Because they have subsidiaries that can compete.
If anything were to happen. Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Dosimo. So please, for Mr. Pro, we would like to know, do you believe that the fintech field is a really lucrative path for lawyers to take? Do you think like in the future and even currently that, it's a very big field where lawyers can effectively, prosper in, basically?
It depends on your definition of lucrative, but I would say yes.
Perhaps we should start from that. Perhaps you can define lucrative for us.
I think lucrative is actually subjective based on. I think lucrative is actually subjective based on your year of experience, actually. So, once you become a lawyer, you realize that you are valued based on your experience and based on your years of experience. So what might be lucrative for an NYSC might not necessarily be lucrative for someone with a 5 years post-call. All right, so I think that what I will tell you is that there are a lot of opportunities in the tech space. All right, so it is an area of law that will keep growing because the tech space will keep growing. It's not as much as because you currently see the CBN trying to I won't say they're trying to stifle the growth. They're trying to find a way to control how it flows. But what they're trying to do is not necessarily to stop it, but to control it. Even at that, the tech community just keeps going to continue keep growing. The cryptocurrency community is going to keep growing. We're going to have a lot more fintech. We're going to have a lot more innovative ideas in terms of how fintech companies try to solve the economical problems, the financial problems of Nigeria, how to try and bring the unbanked into the umbrella. We're going to see a lot of innovative ideas coming soon, and because of that, there's no way these things can happen without a lawyer. There's no way. They'll always need someone to hold their hands. There's going to be a lot more regulations, certainly. The open banking is not yet up and running fully, and once that happens, you're going to see a lot more activities going on. So I think it's an area of law that's just going to keep growing. It's not going to stop anytime soon, and which is one of the reasons I chose it, actually. It's just going to keep growing. It's not going to stop anytime soon. And with what we're seeing in the AI sector, that is massive. And you're seeing a lot more growth out of the country in the EU. EU has been a bit more proactive to incorporate the EU the AI law of EU. And we see a lot of more grants going on in the US, in the Western world generally, a lot of encouragement of research. And because of all these, AI is going to keep growing in those areas. And once they grow in those areas, it's going to be the same thing we've experienced in Nigeria. They're going to come down to the country to try and establish subsidiaries. And because Nigeria is typically the largest black country, you're going to see a lot more of these countries trying to come into the country, try and establish, try and get a piece of the economic cake that is going on in Nigeria. There's a lot of because I think a lot of foreign companies believe that it's lucrative to open in Nigeria for some reason. So yeah, so we're certainly going to see a lot more activities. We're certainly going to see a lot more so in these activities there will be a lot more opportunities for lawyers to participate, for lawyers to advise. And with that, I feel that it's a lot of opportunities for young lawyers, a lot of opportunities for us to grow our expertise. And yeah, once there's opportunity, there's pay. Pay comes with it. So you'll be remunerated for your services.
Sorry, I think there's a problem with Chidera's network. She'll be back in the next few seconds.
All right, no problem. I think it's actually across board.
My apologies, Mr. R. It appears I was disconnected from the call. I really do apologize. Um, I have one final question for both speakers, actually. I just want to know what is the best and the worst thing about participating in your field? Mr. Aro, you said that you love the fact that your field is still developing. Is that what you think is the best thing about your field? And if so, what is the worst thing about your field?
What I would say is the best thing is generally for me as a general what I'll peg as the best thing for the field is that it's still developing. But personally, I feel it's because it's an area of life I just sought to conquer, and that was just it. I just wanted to, I can jump on it and ride on it. So that was just it. But what I would say is the worst thing is that because it is still growing, there's a lot of uncertainties in a lot of places. There are a lot of gray areas. There are a lot of undecided things where they are neither here nor there. You're not sure whether they are regulated or unregulated. So that really is, so it makes a lot of investors, a lot of companies uncomfortable. And because you are the one that has to deliver that news, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable because I have to then tell them that, oh, I'm not so sure what the position is on this. So because of that, it's neither here nor there. It's a gray area. You then have that's for me, that's the worst part of the fintech sector. But of course, I assume it's something that would over time, with that away, we're going to have a lot more regulations and all those areas will be dealt with.
Recording in progress. If you want to reach out to him, he has dropped his email address and you can contact him, ask him questions.
My apologies. What about you, Mr. Dosmo? What do you think is the best and worst thing about your field?
Thank you so much, sir.
I think
so what we are going to now is we are going to have a breakfast, lunch.
okay, so I think the best thing about the field really is that you have an opportunity to define the field, right? You literally could be the one that So for context, for example, I had to up on a call with the SEC's digital exchange last week. Oh, sorry, 2 weeks ago. Sorry, last week actually. Today's Saturday. Last week, and I had to explain certain things to them in context of the ARIP application. They had to call in the entire team so that I could give context on why I think that's such exciting, because you sort of feel like you're creating something new, something novel. So I think that's the best thing about it. Sort of, yeah, you feel very, especially for someone like me who is very big on problem solving. So you just get to, employ your problem solving skills and whatnot. In terms of what the worst thing about the field is, I think it's sometimes looking at regulations and just shaking your head that, come on, guys. So, for example, I had to hop on a call with an international client that was trying to bring to the firm that wanted to do mobile money operations. And trying to explain the difference between the MMO framework in Nigeria and what they were used to in other West African countries, and trying to justify why the Nigerian position is the way it was difficult to say the least. Because sometimes when regulators put certain things in place, you sort of get what they are trying to say, but at the same time, from a business perspective, when I explain it to a client, the client feels like you are saying jazz because nobody would actually put that kind of things in place. Do you understand? So for me, I think that we still have a long way to go in terms of what to regulate and how to regulate. And it's a very interesting thing because I know that the SEC, for example, has can't imagine what the documents now. There's a document that they have that sets out how they're supposed to bring in new regulations and whatnot. And then the CBN has in terms of its service charter that's supposed to set out how they also deal with all of these things, but they sometimes don't follow these things, and it's put in a very uncomfortable position, especially when you're someone that sort of follows what is going on in Nigeria, so you can advise your clients and follow what is going on in the international scene, so that you're not a local champion and you're able to even bring in guys from overseas. So I think that's my own biggest problem, with the space. But I mean, I've been opportune to work with some of these guys in the regulatory space and sort of change things here and there. Have an opportunity to work with some of the guys in the National Assembly and sort of propose changing things here and there. Have an opportunity to work with guys in the executive also, and even at state level. So say, okay, maybe this can be changed this way, maybe things can be changed that way. So maybe as things progress, we would have a lot more clarity and coherence in what we regulate and how we regulate things.
Thank you so much, Mr. Desumo. This brings us to the end of our first panel session. Mr. Desumo and Mr. Aro, we're very grateful for your answers, and we're very sure that it will definitely impact our choices in joining the fintech field and guiding how we're going to do this. But before we conclude, it appears one final participant has one more question. The question is, what are the opportunities available for lawyers to work remotely in fintech? And examples of companies that seek remote legal services.
Yes. So, let me the simple strategy. If you focus only on Nigerian law, the chances that you work with is with most often don't in the office. I mean, a few of them, like my brother in Orlando, when they're enjoying, I think they do 2 days a week or something. But most firms want you to actually be physically present in the office. Most companies too want you to be physically present in the office. But if you make yourself a little more international, you can work remotely, and it's very lucrative. So, especially if you're able to secure a crypto gig, you can be paid ridiculous amount of money for ridiculously little amount of work. Like the kind of work that you'll finish on a Monday, so they'll give you to do in a week. Crypto companies are interesting. So yes, you can work remotely, especially. So my advice for you is, maybe if someone had given this advice, I'll probably be doing that by now. Go and read the MICA. Read that entire 166-page document. Understand everything there, and start shooting out applications to crypto companies. You might be lucky and you get something. The good thing about these things is that it's foot in the door. Immediately you get a break in just consolidate. You can never tell where you would go. Maybe you join Binance and be their regulatory support or something. But I mean, it's a lot of fun and it's very exciting. And then you work remotely. But if you are doing Nigerian law, my brother or my sister, you enter office.
Thank you so much for that answer. I'm sure it's very helpful to the participants. And we're going to be very afraid of working in Nigeria in fintech from now on. So thank you for that.
You
Thank
just
you
be
so
happy.
much to all our panelists. And we will now go to the second panel session. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, I'm Susanna Oladejo, and I'll be introducing our next panelist for the data protection session to us. Our first panelist is Ms. Ada Agwocha. Ms. Ada is the team lead for the Intellectual Property and Technology Practice Group at Banwan Gudalu, where her expertise spans a diverse range of areas, including intellectual property, media and entertainment, data protection and technology. In her role, she has been instrumental in providing counsel on a multitude of transactions, both local and international, as well as those with cross-border and multi-jurisdictional dimensions. She possesses extensive knowledge of Nigeria's data privacy laws and actively assists clients in navigating the complex landscape. Ms. Ada's role involves supporting businesses in the development and implementation of robust privacy frameworks tailored to their specific needs. She is a certified data privacy professional, a testament to her commitment to staying abreast of the latest developments in data protection. As a thought leader and active participant in the legal community, she is a member of several local and international intellectual property and data privacy associations. This involvement not only reflects her dedication to professional development, but also positions her as a valuable resource in staying informed about global best practices and emerging trends in the ever-evolving field of intellectual property and data privacy. In addition to her advisory role, Ms. Ada's expertise extends to guiding clients across various sectors in achieving compliance with data protection laws and regulations. She is adept at handling complex issues such as data breaches and assists organizations in implementing effective data governance frameworks to manage privacy risks proactively. Our second panelist for the protection session is Ms. Thelma Okori. She is a key member of the data protection as well as the intellectual property and technology practice groups at Banwan Igudalu and has over the years established a track record in providing efficient legal advisory on data protection and intellectual property matters. As a certified information privacy professional, she ensures organizations are in compliance with global best practices such as the GDPR, the CCPA, the POPIA, and the Nigeria Data Protection Provisions. Ms. Thelma has conducted meticulous data protection audits, extending her expertise to provide compliance services to indigenous organizations and esteemed international over-the-top companies entrusted with processing the personal data of Nigerian citizens and residents. Acting in shaping policies, Ms. Thelma is a member of the Innovation and Intellectual Property Community, as well as the Data and Digital Economy Community in the National Assembly Business Environment Roundtable Expert Network, where she assists in reviewing legislative bills before the Parliament for consideration and passage into law. She also contributes globally as a member of the Intellectual Association of Privacy Professionals and also regularly publishes on intellectual property and data protection issues, and she has written a number of articles on this subject matter. Ms. Thelma is also a resource person and has delivered numerous trainings on data protection implementation to high-profile companies in the telecommunications, fintech, telemedicine, and FMCG sectors. Thank you.
Good day, everyone, and thank you, Susanna, for that wonderful introduction. My name is Banire Mariam, an intern at Lex Lata, and I'll be moderating the second panelist session titled Emerging Careers in Data Protection. And I'll be asking our guests a series of questions about their journey in the data protection field. And I'll start now. Moving to Ms. Ada. Going through your profile, I can see that you have a background in IP, media and entertainment as well. So I would like to ask, what was your motivation for going into this field, and how exactly did you know you wanted to go into the field? Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, Miriam, and thank you for. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. And forgive me for not putting on my camera. Due to some heavy conflict, I'm in transit at the moment, so my background is not good. So please forgive
Okay.
me.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. Right. So when I started my practice, my initial focus was intellectual property. However, at about 2018, if you recall, there was a very well-publicized breach incident involving Cambridge Analytica and their use of personal data of Facebook users without their consent. And that data was used to build a profile of millions of people around the world without their consent. And that profile was then used to make certain decisions, including political decisions regarding those people. That was my first encounter with, personal data being used in any way, right? That is beyond to probably just providing information to somebody. The idea of taking someone's personal data and building a profile of the person and doing a lot of making decisions based on that profile was something quite novel to me and so interesting. So I followed the news just like every other person. And then shortly afterwards, I changed jobs. I moved to another law firm. And I was also in the IP team in that firm. And incidentally, that same year, 2019, was the year the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation was issued. For the first time, the first regulation in Nigeria that governs data protection, use of personal data. And my team was involved with reviewing the regulation and advising clients at that point when nobody had any understanding or experience in that field, especially in Nigeria. So that was pretty much my experience with the Cambridge Analytica story, and then being thrown into a team that I had to then provide advice to clients on the fly pretty much on a new law was, I would say it was maybe evidence because it kind of combined what I was interested in and what was relevant at the time. And that's how my career in personal data and data protection started.
Thank you very much for that answer. Pursuant to what you mentioned joining a new law firm in 2019, which was coincidental with the introduction of the Nigerian Data Protection Act. So was it difficult for you to kind of get used to the new team, the new law firm, as well as your new interests?
That's an interesting question. Thank you. I would say yes, not necessarily because of the work itself, but because of the composition of the team. I'd worked in a law firm before that was a much smaller firm. I would come to a boutique law firm, and it was strictly an intellectual property firm, right? So I then moved into another firm. So I joined the intellectual property, but it was a much bigger law firm with different teams within the firm. And the way the firm kind of ran was almost as though each team was like a small firm within the larger. So it was kind of difficult for me to adjust to that, to the drastic change. And then once I got used to the terrain, I kind of enjoyed the interaction with my team and other teams, right? Because you will hardly ever find a client who comes to you and the only problem they have is in one area of law. It's more likely that there will be like, several areas of law that will be necessary. Right? And so I was working in an office where there were people with all kinds of experience in the same space as me, and I could just walk into the office or give them a call to say, hey, I have a client that's had this issue, maybe it's something related to tax. What do you think? Can you help me? And it was so interesting because I was able to learn things that all my years in the previous firm, I didn't have the opportunity to learn. I mean, I could go and read up those stuff and learn it theoretically, but that practical experience was lacking in my previous firm. And so even though there was that short period of adjustment and getting used to the new terrain, it was ultimately a very important and interesting experience for me.
Thank you, Miss Ada, for that wonderful answer. So, as you said, practical experience helps a lot. I would like to direct the same questions to Ms. Thelma Okori as a certified data professional, which is very, very impressive. What was your motivation to go into the data protection field, as well as how did your interest in this field spark up? Thank you. So Miss Thelma just left.
Okay.
I think she has
I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I was just changing devices. Sorry, so what was your question?
Okay, so I said I would like to direct the same question to you as a certified data professional, which is very, very impressive. What was your motivation to go into the data protection field, and how did your interest for this field spark up?
Okay, so
sorry, before you begin, can you please put on your camera so our audience can better relate with you?
Okay.
Thank you so much. Yes.
So my interest in data protection started, I think, 2018, 2019, but it solidified mainly in 2019 when the data protection regulation was introduced in Nigeria. Because before then, it was mainly just an interest, but it wasn't like my day-to-day activities because data protection wasn't prevalent in Nigeria then. But 2019, the NDPR came out, and then there was this whole buzz of what's this law about, what's going on. And the firm, because it was just intellectual property, I was in the team for intellectual property. And then they wanted to create a data protection group. So I volunteered to join that. And that basically grew my interest. So it wasn't no longer like a hobby, but it was now more of something I had to learn so I can advise clients, legal advisory, day-to-day work. So it was essentially the introduction of the NDPR and then having to learn this and put it into practice in my day-to-day that led to me having or developing my expertise in data protection.
So I would like to ask, transitioning for you, was it a bit difficult? Did you find it difficult at first? Because you mentioned that you had to advise people on it. So getting to know the new laws and the new developments, was it like a bit difficult for you?
I won't say it was difficult because data protection is actually fairly easy to understand. So it's not like a really convoluted space that has a lot of technical words that are not self-explanatory. But when you read the law, you see things like data controller. On the face of it, what is a data controller? Someone that controls data, a data subject, things like that. So personal data, what exactly is personal data? What falls under personal data? What falls under processing? And then you just realize that when you get familiar with the keywords, it's easier to be able to apply and provide expertise and provide explanation for people that need your service.
Thank you very much. So I would also like to ask you, does it require like a lot of technical knowledge to understand data protection? And do you think a postgraduate degree is necessary?
So, do I think a postgraduate degree is necessary? It depends. So there's certification for certification's sake to see, certification shows, okay, it's like a badge you wear that I know this thing. And then there's experience. So it depends on the level you're going to and what you want to use it for. For me personally, I don't like school, first of all, so I don't see myself going back to school for any postgraduate or anything like that. So it's more of an experience that you can answer any question and you can actually provide creative solutions to clients' problems. So that's my own perspective. It's you need to research, you need to read, and you need to read wide because even if Nigeria has the law on it, we're not the pioneers of this area. Before we came out, there's GDPR, there's the other, like America has some privacy things, GDPR has it, there's a lot of other countries that have privacy provisions. So what you find is that you need to read all that to actually have a broader understanding because most times your clients are not even national, they are international.
So you need to understand the law of where they are coming from. Because if an EU company comes to say, "Oh, I need advice on how law data is processed in Nigeria," you need to be able to understand where they are coming from, meaning understand the GDPR, and now know how to explain it from that angle and apply it into the Nigerian space. So if there's any similarities between GDPR and Nigeria, if there's any differences that they need to take note of, and things like that, that minor things that they might need to change in their privacy policies to fit into the Nigerian space.
Thank you so much for that answer. I would also like to direct the same question to Ms. Ada. Did you had to learn any technical information with regards to data protection? And do you also think a postgraduate degree in the field is necessary?
Thank you. So I agree with Thelma. I don't think you need a postgraduate degree. Certifications are good for the sake of maybe having it on your CV, opening some doors for you. That's what you're looking at. But in terms of the actual knowledge, you don't need any of that. And I also agree with Thelma. She says the law itself is quite simple and straightforward, and that's true. It's very commonsensical. When you read it for the first time, it all makes sense. What I think is the most important thing, and that comes with experience, is actually advising businesses, advising government regulation. And what is so interesting for me about data protection is finding that balance, because data protection is pretty much a struggle between two sides. On the one hand, privacy concerns of individuals. On the other hand, businesses being able to utilize personal data, business objectives, right? Both of those interests are legitimate. What is then the balance between the two? That's where the data protection lawyer comes in. How do you advise your client that is a business to them? They're on the right side of the law, but they are not prejudicing their business objectives. They're able to still meet their goals by using the personal data of their customers or persons who provide their data to them in accordance with the law, right? So for me, that is more important. And there is no, as far as I'm aware, any kind of postgraduate degree or education that will teach you that. That's something that you learn over time with experience and practice. In terms of technical knowledge, I assume your reference to technical knowledge is in the tech space, for example. If that is if that's your question, personally I am not tech savvy. I'm able to do the things I need to do to get through my daily life, but in terms of being tech savvy, I am not. It's good to have a basic knowledge of of these things. In terms of being a productive lawyer, I suppose the better you are knowledgeable of these things, the more you're able to situate yourself in your client's shoes, for example, right? It doesn't hurt to have that information. And that is what I am personally building up, trying to get more information, more knowledge in the tech space. So yeah, I suppose it's good. It's not going to hinder one from starting out as a data protection lawyer, but the hope and expectation is that as you go along that journey, you're building up your expertise.
Thank you very much. So essentially for our participants, practical knowledge, reading wide, and staying updated is very, very important in this field. So I'll also like to ask, can you please explain better on what changes international companies need to make to comply with Nigerian regulations?
So, what has been my experience is that when businesses, international companies come into Nigeria and they recognize that they will need to process personal data in the course of their business, the first thing, first of all, if they are coming from an EU country, they already have a bit of a leg up because the GDPR is the pioneer law in data protection in the world, right? And we pretty much are following in their footsteps. So if they're coming from an EU country, they are pretty much what they would require to do, what we would typically advise them to do, is to ensure that what they have in place, because I would assume that they already have their data protection policies in place. And so it's just to ensure that those policies are aligned with Nigerian regulation, which they pretty much are most of the time, because with our NDPR, for example, is pretty much verbatim of the GDPR, right? So for those companies in the EU, they have a little less work to do to be aligned with Nigerian law. For companies in other parts of the world, most international companies, because they already invest a lot in ensuring that they're in compliance, it's not a hard sell for them to ensure compliance with Nigerian law. So what we typically be proposing to them is the first thing is to have a privacy policy that is public facing, that sets out how the company collects personal data, how it processes it, who has access to it, what the data subjects can do if they're unhappy with the way their personal data is being handled, how long the data will be held. It's pretty much just having a policy that sets out the life cycle of the use of personal data from the point of collection to the retention period and for whether or not that data will be deleted and all of that. So that's for us the basic thing. When you have a company that has put together this policy, they've articulated it in a way that is understandable to the general public. And then they put it in a place where it's accessible, right? That for us is the first step. And then every other thing flows from that privacy policy. We want to ensure that we have a management team that recognizes their obligation under the data protection laws in Nigeria. We want to ensure that you are conducting regular audits of your processes to ensure that you're in compliance with the law. We want to be training your people to ensure that they understand what the obligations of the company is under the law and that they are implementing the policies of the company. So it's a whole gamut of steps that it's taken, and it's not just for one of them. It continues on for the life cycle for the lifetime of that business in Nigeria, from the point of entry into the business and continues.
Hi, Miss Ada. Okay, thank you so much for that wonderful answer. So I'll be directing the next question to Ms. Thelma also. In interacting with these international companies, do you face any difficulties aside from maybe complying with the Nigerian regulations, understanding their needs, and establishing a team that understands whatever they want at that point? So do you face any difficulty in particular?
So not really, because like Ada said, they're actually quite responsive to compliance and they do want to comply. But I think the major difference you have is because again, let's still go back to the GDPR. The GDPR is there and they have this commission that produces a lot of regulatory documents that explain maybe each section of the law. And even in the Act, there's something called recitals. So you have section 1 and there's a recital under that explains what and how it's to be applied. But in the NDPA that just came out, you just have the law. So we're still waiting on that explanatory side. And so while you are able to give, while in the UK or EU, they have a whole lot of resource documents that explain the applicability of these laws, we have to start dealing with, is it this way? How should we apply it? How is it going to be defined? How is it going to be interpreted? And most times that uncertainty is what they don't like. So you see something as simple as a fine. Our law says 10% of your annual turnover or 2%, whichever is higher. And in the GDPR, it specifies for the global, if it's a global company, it specifies that it's your global annual turnover. So Nigeria gets its annual turnover. And we find a lot of multinational companies coming to ask, does this mean for all our companies in the world, or is it just the Nigerian part? So just little things like this, like explanation and interpretation, is where we have most of the issues. But aside that, like I said, they're receptive to compliance. They do want to comply so they don't fall, they're not liable to fines and fees, because, I mean, you see in the EU, in the UK, you see how they bill them and just any small thing, penalty. I think this is the one that was released yesterday, this FCTPC one, the first major pronounced fee that has been delivered in Nigeria. They just fined Meta 220 million. So you see that that's like the first $220 million. So that's the first major one that has been pronounced in Nigeria. Before then, we didn't have any what they call it precedents on how fines work against multinational organizations. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thelma. So, Ms. Ada, I would also like to ask, with these shortcomings in the Nigerian law, does it cost you a lot at work to meet up with these international companies? So,
What I find is because our laws are relatively new, right? The NPA is only just over a year old. And because of how recent it is, there is still a lot of components at right? And the implementation of the provisions of the law, because we haven't had a lot of time to, for it to have been implemented and for us to understand the direction of the regulator, or even have court pronouncements or certain provisions. What we find ourselves in the situation of with our clients is that we have to then explain to them that, look, there's no pronouncement on this. We can only guess what the regulator has to be in this circumstance based on our experience of, in this, so we're not, we kind of find, excuse me, we kind of find ourselves in a position where we are pretty much just making a lot of assumptions because the law is very new. And the expectation and the hope is that with time, all of these assumptions will have more concrete basis to hold those opinions, because there are lots of entities that have been going to court on certain provisions of the law. Those cases have not yet come to an end. Decisions have not yet been handed down. So we hope that with time, as these issues are being debated in court, as we continue to engage with the regulator, a bit more certainty will emerge on many of these issues, specifically on the fining regime, right? The law states a specific thing, which there is still a lot of a wiggle room there. One of the questions that one of our multinational clients asked was, oh, would that fine based on the turnover of a business, would it relate to only the turnover generated in Nigeria, or would it generate amounts relate to the turnover for business around the world? And then the answer is the latter. How would you determine, how would the regulator ensure compliance, right? How do you ensure that they're providing the correct information? And so all of this is just are the things that we expect that with time, as the law is getting, as lots of people are engaging with the regulators, as lots of people are asking questions in court, we get a more certainty.
Okay. Thank you very much, Miss Ada. Moving on, the next question I would like to ask is for fresh graduates, undergraduates, new lawyers, what do you think they have to do in order to go into this field if they are interested in it? For Ms. Thelma. Thank you.
Sorry, you said what happened to undergraduates? It was breaking. I didn't hear you.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me clearly now?
Yes, I can hear you clearly now.
Okay, I said for undergraduates, recent graduates, fresh lawyers who wish to start a career in data protection, what do you think are the steps they have to take to go into this field? Yeah.
Oh, okay. So like with everything you are interested in, definitely reading. So get familiar with the Act. It just came out. It was signed last year, 2023. Get familiar with the Act. Start with, you can go to the NDPR. The NDPR hasn't been expunged. It's still valid. The NDPR, the implementation framework. So start with those basic documents that have been released, and then online. So broaden your knowledge beyond Nigeria. See how it applies in other states, other African countries. South Africa has the PROPIA, the Mauritius has one, Kenya has data protection. So what you find is that sometimes it's mostly a replication in most countries because GDPR was the root of all these laws. So
Yeah.
aside the laws, um, the regulations that the GDPR releases and those supplementary documents are actually really helpful because you find that they discuss everything and they give you practical solutions and give you
Yeah.
examples of what is and what isn't. So I find those were like the most helpful documents I had when I started this data protection. The documents released by the ECPB, they do actually help expatiate and give you proper explanation on what is expected in data protection. So, and then textbooks, you have textbooks. I know Olumide Bawala has released a textbook on data protection. He also has one on the compilation of data protection cases in Nigeria. So that also um, tells you where the court mind is. So so he has a textbook and he has a compilation of cases. So those two resources are also helpful to increase your knowledge in data protection law in Nigeria. And internet research. Start to Google, just sit down, Google. There are different articles. A lot of people have written articles. A lot of people have written opinions, scholarly things. So you just need to be careful to understand what applies in different countries, so you're not mixing some things up. So that's just it. But the information is a lot, and information is plenty. So that's it.
Yes, thank you, ma. For Miss Ada, I would like to ask for same as what she said, for upcoming for fresh graduates, undergraduates, and new lawyers. Do you think doing an internship in this field is important, and what kind of firms can they go to practice or to intern in?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So for fresh graduates, I would say that first we already have the tools to be to at least be an entry-level data protection lawyer. And I say that because all law students have gone through constitutional law, right? Data protection is founded on the fundamental right to privacy. That's the fundamental. So any person who's a graduate, we already have the basic tools, right? And then for an internship, it never hurts to have to do an internship. Many of the law firms that I'm aware of in Lagos have data protection teams, they have a data protection practice. And so interning with any of those firms would be a fantastic experience. And as Thelma said, you gain so much from reading on your own, right? There's so much material online, including formal textbooks. But even besides that, there's so much news and reporting about data protection, about use of personal data by businesses. There's a lot of talk nowadays about AI and AI tools being developed and how how they can be used by persons and how the tools, even while you're using them, is collecting your personal data, right? So there's so much material. In fact, I would even say that there's even more material there now than when we started out because of the world's recognition of the importance of data. So obviously, doing your own groundwork, reading up as much as you can, and then finding those places where you can engage with people who are in the space. That could be via an internship. That could be also just attending events organized by, persons or organizations in that space. I attended one yesterday organized by the NDPC in Unilag, and I was happy to see that there were lots of students in attendance. And so those sort of events are also very important. If you have opportunity, I would say to graduates, even undergraduates, during your vacation, if you have opportunity to attend this sort of events, take advantage of them. They are also very useful.
Okay. Thank you, Miss Ada. So I would also like to ask, for the sake of our participants, can you recommend some firms for them to look out for, and some of the organizations too they can look out for? Same goes to Miss Thelma after Miss Ada. Thank you.
Well, so I'm going to call the names as I recall of the law firms that I know that have a data protection team, right? Yeah. So there's obviously Banwa and Vidalo, we have a data protection team, both in Lagos and our Abuja office. We
Yeah.
have, then I'll also recommend, let me see. So I understand that Olaniwo Ajayi has a data protection team. So pretty much any team that has, any firm that has an intellectual property team, they'll typically have a data protection team. So if you go online and just Google, you go to any of the law firms, you check their practice areas. If they have intellectual property, there's a very good chance that they will have data protection. Some of them would even explicitly state that they have a data protection team. So any of the big law firms, I understand Templars also have a data protection team. So, and I would say don't even just limit your search to the big law firms, right? There are so many other less known firms that may also be a very good fit, because from my experience, the bigger the law firm, the less likely that you are going to get opportunities to interact with the persons who are actually who are actually in the space that you want to be in. I don't know if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I get.
Because where you're in a smaller firm, you have a good chance for one-on-one interaction with members of the team. They may have more time to pay, they may have more time for you, for an intern, right? So what I'd suggest is go online, look for law firms, see the areas, and you can even give a call to anyone in the firm to ask, oh, do you have a data protection team? Can I come and
Yeah.
intern for a few weeks? That sort of thing. And then for organizations, there is the NDPC, obviously the regulator. They have a lot of resources on their website. You can go on their website and find a lot of information. There are also a lot of other entities that I don't recall their names now. Perhaps what I could do is I can send, when I find them, I can send you an email so that you can share with your members.
Yes, we really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Ms.
So,
Thelma, do you have any organizations or firms you would like to recommend to our participants?
Okay, so not really recommend, because to be honest, I don't know what goes on inside anybody's data protection team. But I think the easiest way to do this is just to check online. What you find out is that any law firm that has a practice group, they tend to write about it. So check data protection and check the firms that have published topics on data protection. That way you can see on Mondak. Mondak is like a resource for most law firms, and most law firms post things there. So check Mondak, check the firms that have posted any topic at all on data protection, because that's their means of advertising. So you know that they're definitely in that space. Organizations that are not law firms, I think there's something called tax aid or tax, something like that, or check advisory. There's also I can't really remember their name. There's an initiative that took Ikigai, something that took data protection to court. And it's just Ikigai that's coming to mind, because that's the Ikigai case. But there's something like that. So, but like I said, just check online. Anyone that has written an article on data protection, they obviously have a data protection practice group, and you can reach out to the people on LinkedIn. And then from LinkedIn, if they respond to you, all fair and good, and you can from there ask them you're interested in internship and you want to learn more about data protection within their firm. So.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much for that answer. So we have some questions from our participants, and which is as follows. How well does the NDPC limit non-compliance by data controllers and processors to the NDPR or NDPA?
I'm sorry, could you take that again?
Okay. How well does the NDPC limit non-compliance by data controllers and processors to the NDPR or NDPA?
Okay, so the NDPC I don't know how many there are in terms of number, but you would imagine that it's a government agency. They have their budgetary constraints, and then their mandate is to oversee processing of personal data of all entities within Nigeria. So they really have a huge task, right? And I'm aware that they are ramping up their enforcement abilities, but in terms of the extent to which they are able to oversee or enforce compliance, I think that they still have a way to go because of obviously the disparities in their numbers and their reach versus the scope of their jurisdiction. But one thing that has been very interesting to watch happen over time is that if a breach incident should occur, right, for a big entity, I think the most recent one that comes to mind is the one relating to NIMSI. I'm sure many of you would have heard about it, where people were able to buy people's personal data from certain websites, obviously, who had gotten the data of Nigerians from the NIMSI database, right? So what I've experienced is that when there is a high interest in a specific breach incident, the NVPC is more often than not investigating that. And that is typically, I imagine, because lots of people are affected and it's also a matter of public interest. For many of our small businesses or companies in Nigeria who are data controllers, right? Because they may not be in the spotlight in the same way, if something were to go wrong on their end, that they violate the law, for example, the chance that the NGPC will be involved is not as high because the NDPC does not have that reach. Although I should say that there are provisions in the law that says if a breach should occur, you're supposed to inform the NDPC. But I am aware that many of these entities will not do it. But in those circumstances where they do report to the NDPC, then investigation happens, and that investigation will typically help them to make recommendations to that business so that that breach will not occur in the future. And then sometimes fines will follow. So their oversight powers, their oversight so far at this point is really, I would say, focused on those public interest incidents and for the big companies that that handle the data of many people.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Miss Ada. I hope that answers your question, Emmanuel. So before I take the second question from our participants, I also like to ask, what's like the a typical day for a lawyer working in data protection? And as a lawyer working in a law firm, what percentage of your overall work relates to data protection? I'll be directing that question to Ms. Thelma.
Okay, so
Thank you.
what percentage of my work deals with data protection?
Yes.
Because the firm I work with is not, you're divided into departments. So you don't do everything. So my department is IT and technology, meaning that if I'm not working on IT matters, I'm working on data protection matters. There's no other additional thing that requires my attention from the Lagos office. So I can't really say percentage because it's every day I'm doing something on data protection. So it's either a client has sent a question that I need to respond to, or we are following up on audits, or we are conducting audits, and so every day there's something that has to do with data protection. So there's no particular percentage. And typical day, resume, check my email, look for the clients that have sent requests, and start doing the necessary research to formulate the responses that they need. So that's basically it.
Yes, that sounds interesting. So I'll be directing the same question to Miss Ada. To what's a typical day like for you, and do you work solely on data protection? I know that you also work in IP and media and entertainment. So do you while working on data protection cases or matters, do you also like interchange with IP and media entertainment?
Yeah, so the flow of work to me on a daily basis is a combination of all three. Depending on the time of the year, some might have, there'll be a lot more flow from one aspect. So like early in the year, data protection work, I'd say maybe makes up 60% of the work that I do because there is a March 15 deadline for data controllers and processors to do certain things. So we're typically trying to reach out to our clients to remind them of the deadline, We are helping our clients, put together their documents to file before the deadline. So there's a lot of data protection work at that time of the year. Towards the end of the year, because this is Lagos and we have the Dirty December practice, so a lot of events happen, media entertainment kind of ramps up towards the end of the year. But throughout the course of the year, I would say intellectual property, there's a steady flow of intellectual property work, right? So, and that constitutes still over 50% of my daily work every day.
Okay. Thank you for that. We also have another question from our participant. He is asking, is your services as a data protection lawyer limited to tech companies, or do you work for healthcare organizations as well? For Miss Ada, she's still here with us.
Yeah, I think the majority of the clients we get are clients in the tech space, right? Okay. Health is one. I think in my time, I probably have done work for maybe 2 or 3 health businesses. And I think that's pretty much a function of the fact that lots of health businesses in Nigeria are not adopting tech with the speed that, say, the financial sector is. I would hope that with time that would change because there's such great opportunities for the in health tech space. But for health companies, there isn't a lot of adoption of tech, it seems, from my experience for health businesses. So the number of health clients from the health space isn't a lot. It's mostly tech businesses, financial institutions, and the like.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. So we also have a question from that same participant. He says, I am currently in Lagos, but it is pretty difficult finding events or conferences, as you mentioned. So what platform do you recommend for finding these events? I'll be directing that question to Ms. Thelma.
Okay, so this is one question I get a lot from a lot of people. What data protection event? Please invite me when you're going, to let me know when you're going. And I think the major resource for any data protection thing you want is the NDPC's page. So NDPC will always post anything they're hosting. So if there's an event tomorrow, they will post it. And the one that Ada mentioned that she went for yesterday, it was posted on their Instagram page. So if you follow NDPC's Instagram page, you will see events that are coming up. Also, some law firms also have, they also organize events. Even some other organizations also organize data protection events, and they all publicize this. So try to just follow either vocal data protection people like again, like I say, like he's very vocal in that space, and he posts a lot of events that are going up. Follow law firms, follow the NDPC. Yeah, and those people always tend to post the events they are going for. I also post events I go for, so that's the way. Hence the question of when next you are going, let me know. So that's it, because most times the regulator invites DPCs or law firms directly. So that's how we know about the events that are coming up.
Okay. Thank you. And I hope that answers our participants' question. So rounding up, I would like to ask both of our panelists, what do you love most about practicing in data protection? To Ms. Ada first.
So I enjoy that I will call it a fight, right? The fight between privacy rights and the rights of businesses or the interest of businesses in utilizing data for their business objectives. That for me is a very interesting yin and yang. On the one hand, as an individual, I say, oh, my right to my privacy should be absolute. I shouldn't, at least to the extent that I give my consent, you can only use my data to the extent to which I consent. And as an individual, standing in my shoes as an individual, as a private person, I'll say, yes, that's absolute. When I put on my lawyer hat and I think about it, like, well, what about a business? What about a Facebook, for example? If I use the Facebook platform, I'm pretty much, it's a free service, really. So what does the business get in return for giving me something free, right? So to what extent would the Facebook, for example, have a right to use my data in, for example, marketing, because that's their main source of revenue? So it's that fight between these two sides that I find very interesting. And there's never usually a simple straight answer. It's always something very nuanced. Because on the one hand, you want to ensure that people have a right or freedom to contract. If I sign up to Facebook, I should understand why or how my data will be used. So where does the law come in? How does the law protect me as an individual using the platform? How does the law protect Facebook's business?
Yeah.
And that's for me is what I find super interesting about data protection. And these questions will continue to will continue to be asked over and over and over again. And that for me, there isn't a clear answer, and I find it super interesting.
Okay. Thank you, Miss Ada. Miss Thelma, what do you love most about practicing in data protection?
So for me, I think I just love the practical aspect of it. Data protection is something you see in our day-to-day lives. It's something you see everywhere. I'm currently at a meeting right now, and someone passed a paper that everybody should write their name, email, phone number, and all of that. And it that simple act that typically normally people won't blink an eye to, they will just write their name, okay, the attendance sheet. People said like it struck up a conversation and they were like, oh, why is there no privacy notice on this? How do we know what this paper is for? We don't know the organization that is sending this paper. We don't know what you guys want to use our information for. And it was like everyone in the room was aware of the provisions of the law. So you find that it's actually in your day-to-day life. Anything as simple as going for an event, writing your name at the door is data protection. So is there a consent in place? Is there a notice? Are they telling you what is going to be used for? How long is going to be stored? So it's just how important and how prevalent it is in our day-to-day lives that actually gets me, so let me say, excited or interested in data protection on a day-to-day basis. So that's it for me.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for those insightful lessons. I've learned a lot today, and I'm sure our participants will have learned a lot. For our participants, feel free to connect with Miss Ada and Miss Thelma on LinkedIn, especially for those that are interested in the events they organize in the data protection sector. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll be handing over to Susanna now to read this. I'll be handing over to Susanna now. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariam. Now I'll be introducing our final speaker for the Artificial Intelligence panel session. And the speaker is Miss Ekene Chuks Okeke. Ms. Ekene is an emerging technologies attorney and currently a legal fellow at Luminous Law, a specialized law firm of legal experts and data scientists in Washington, D.C., focusing exclusively on AI governance. Before this, she practiced law in Nigeria, most recently advising on intellectual property, privacy, and technology law as Banwan Gudalo. Ms. Ekene holds an LLM in law, technology, and entrepreneurship from Cornell University, and she is also a certified information privacy professional and a fellow with the Internet Law and Policy Foundry. Thank you.
Hi,
Thank
Susanna.
you very much, Susan.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Susan, for that introduction. Welcome, Mrs. Ekene, to the career seminar. I would like to inform everybody that unfortunately, our second panelist, Mr. Akintunde, is not on the call. He could not make it. And so it will be just me and Mrs. Ekene during this panel session.
Ekene is fine. Just Ekene.
All right. Ekene, my first question is, what led you to the AI space? Like, how did you get into that field? especially considering the fact that as of that time, AI was not as notorious as it is right now. So what drew your interest to that, and how did you first learn about it?
I think for me, it was just the timing that lined up at the time. So like AI is something that, yes, I was conscious of. Um, like it's literally the difference between like how your iPhone pictures turn out different from your Samsung photos. Like it's not just the physical elements, it's also the algorithm behind it. So it's something I was always aware of, but you could say that AI really entered my consciousness about the same time as most of us, right? Like ChatGPT, late 2022. So using these tools got me really interested in the science behind them because I was in grad school at the time for my master's. So I was already using DALL-E to generate images, and then ChatGPT launched in November 2022, and it was just like, I mean, exciting. And then my first class in the new year, 2023, was on generative AI, and it was a fantastic breakdown of the technical and the legal background to these technologies from an expert lawyer working with AI companies. And I guess I was hooked. So I had to look into it after then, and different events led me to this point right now.
All right. Your first class that you mentioned on generative AI, was that while you were in university, or this was after you had graduated and been called to class?
I mean, depending on which university you're talking about, because actual law, LLB, that was 11 years ago. No, 12 years ago. So not that. So I mean like in my master's program, like my first class in 2023 was on generative AI.
All right. Could you please explain how exactly artificial intelligence is linked to law? How can law students kind of connect with that space? How are the two conjoined? Exactly.
I mean, law touches
Like, is there
every
a career?
in it. I think law touches every aspect of society, right? It's like everything, every single thing that you can think of has laws that apply to it, may have some compliance involved. So to that extent, I would say that yes, AI is going to impact legal practice. There are people like my current firm who just focus on AI specifically, and there's that. But even for people who aren't running AI law firms, like AI is going to impact like your different practices, like it's impacting employment. If you're using AI systems in healthcare, like it's going to touch, it already impacts everything. And then I think that as lawyers, there's more to also think about how AI could impact our own actual practice of law, whether it's in the tools we use or how we serve our clients. So there's that aspect to it too.
All right, you mentioned that your first class was the generative AI, and this was while you were pursuing your master's degree. So does that mean that for law students who are looking to this particular field in technology, must they pursue a master's as well, or is it possible to delve into that space with just your LLB?
Absolutely. It's possible to get into AI with just your LLB. Like there are different reasons for doing a master's. I mean, the LLB is like the mandatory education that you need to qualify as a lawyer, and everything else is just extra. I feel like in thinking about whether I want to do a master's, it will have to depend on your goals, like what you're trying to do. Are you trying to break into a new jurisdiction? Are you trying to get into a new practice area? If you're trying to get into a new practice area, it helps when you say you have this certification or you have this, specific master's or training, but I don't think you have to do one. For instance, in the program that I did, while I had this class on generative AI, there was no actual course on AI. And now the year after I did it, they now have an AI class, right? But anyone can. And there's so many opportunities to learn AI because everyone is getting up to speed, whether it's like lawyers that are practicing. So you have certifications like KDIP, Center for AI and Digital Policy. They have a research group. They have like a program where you could learn how to analyze AI policy. There's lots of AI resources online. If anyone wants that, you could reach out to me on LinkedIn because I see a bunch of these things. So I think there's so much that you can learn for free. But then the benefit of a master's is, I guess, structured learning, networking, and just other things But yeah, you definitely don't need a master's to get into AI.
All right, thank you very much. I believe our second panelist has just joined the call, Mr. Akintunde. You're very welcome to the career seminar. We are honored to have you here. I would just ask the same question I asked to Ekene earlier. How did you get into the AI space? How did you delve from getting after your LLB? Like, what drew you there, and how exactly did you find your footing in this particular space?
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Akintunde Agumbiade. I'm sorry I'm joining a bit late. To delve straight into the question, how did I get in the AI space and how have I been finding my feet in the space, right? Okay, so I started my AI journey actually in my final year of university, where my long essay topic was on AI and the Nigerian legal system. And in all honesty, it wasn't like a very intentional choice. It was just I wanted to do something that I felt would be interesting to research or not the typical research topics then for long essays. And in the course of working on this, I realized that this was 2018. This was 2018. I realized that this was a fallow space in the sense that there wasn't a lot of African presence or Nigerian presence in AI from a legal perspective. You would have like maybe top law firms in the UK then, maybe publishing some articles on AI then, but even globally as at then 2018, AI was still like, it was still being a relatively exploratory space. It wasn't a big thing as big as it is right now. And I realized that if I was able to get in early on, I might be able to chart a career path for myself in this place. So it was a bit of a, let's say a bit of a gamble because I mean it was just there were no guarantees then. But I started to give it a shot, and how I was able to build my space was unlike other established fields where lawyers might explore, like let's say tax or maritime or even IP, where you have a long list of, would I say, veterans or accomplished people who have been in the space whom you can get mentorship from or to get guidance from to look at how they've explored that pathway and more or less tailor yourself to in line with how they went down their own path. We don't have that yet. It's developing a lot more. It's getting better now, but we don't have that kind of established expertise in that sentence of strong legal expertise amongst top lawyers then. So it was a lot of what I say experimentation on learning on the go by myself. So I realized I had to do stuff like doing my own research, doing a lot of personal self-study, putting myself out there because I mean, the only way I'm not aware of everything that happens, all the opportunities or all the news that comes out, but putting it out there that, hey, I do research on this thing, I write on this stuff, and then people will share information with me that kind of helped me getting access to fellowships, getting access to people who were also interested in AI, other lawyers who were also interested in AI and talking to them on understanding the journey, how they were navigating the journey. So it's really been a journey of, would I say, learning on the go, really. But thus far it has been absolutely rewarding.
All right. You mentioned that unlike other areas of law that are well established and there are people who have been in that particular area for years and you can get guidance from the artificial intelligence space is not like those ones. So would you say that it's important to take specific courses and that would aid your journey in this particular field, maybe get a master's degree? So how would transitioning or entering into this space be made easier for law students that are currently looking into that field?
Okay, I think that for any law student who wants to get into the AI space, probably the first thing to do is to try to understand what AI is and what it isn't, in terms of just exposing yourself to everything you can in the field, even the technical side of things. You don't actually have to pivot to coding and all of that. Or if you want to, you could, but it's not compulsory. But it's good to appreciate technical side of things, appreciate what things like machine learning mean, things like deep learning mean, what the implications for the AI tools that you interact with, the chatbots, the ChatGPT, the Geminis. Along that path, you will interact with there are several free courses you could take. There's one from Elements of AI. I think I took it in 2018, 2019. I think it's still available. I know someone who recently took it this year, still available online. Courses from Coursera, whether you might want to certificate or not. But all these it's good for someone who's probably just getting into the space to take this kind of thing so that you kind of have like a basic understanding, because there are so many subsets of AI that you could consider now. There's AI within IP. That is like one of the most biggest subfields growing. There's AI in relation to cybercrime, in relation to impersonation, fraud. There's AI in relation to financial services, AI in relation to consumer protection. So these are several subfields that a law student or a lawyer could explore based on. But first, you have to get the general appreciation of the field, and then you get to understand, okay, these are the various subfields within this thing, and then you can then decide based on what interests you really, for which part you want to eventually follow within that. And a master's degree is, well, I think I agree with what I joined when Ikene was speaking, and I think that it is sure a master's degree would depend on the level that you are, because I wouldn't say you should just jump into a master's degree immediately. But it's good to at least have gotten like a basic appreciation. So stuff like CIDP that she mentioned is there. There's also For Humanity. It's they offer courses on algorithmic auditing where they train you on how to use extant laws like the UK GDPR or the EU GDPR to use these laws to audit AI systems. So these are courses that you could take, and to just get like a general appreciation of how extant laws can be used to regulate AI. At least that's within the data protection field. So that when you eventually want to go for a master, because different schools have different master with different strengths and different merits. So you say, okay, maybe this particular master's from this school matches what's the kind of research I've already done, so I should go here. So maybe you want a professional master's or a research master's, depending on, but this is a decision that should be made based on the prior experience that you've gotten, based on the research and the personal study and online courses that you've taken over time. Yes.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Akintunde. We have a question from one of our attendees, and I will firstly direct it to Ms. Ekene. The question is, my final year project on data protection implications of AI in healthcare. Is this something you are open to discussing? Oh, this is directed to Mr. Akintunde. So could you briefly discuss data protection, data privacy implications of AI in healthcare? This is to firstly Mr. Akintunde and then to Ms. Ekene as well.
Okay, so it sounds like an interesting topic. The person has already written on the topic or they are working on it currently. But whichever the case is, I'm guessing that you'll be considering things like the NDPA, the principal law that I'll be considering and working on it currently. So you'll be looking at things like the provisions of the Act in relation to sensitive personal data. I know that the law provides that things like DNA information, DNA, I think sex life or sexual orientation, some of those things are listed as sensitive personal data. So I'm guessing that in doing this kind of research for privacy implications for AI in healthcare, you'll be considering how these elements of personal data that are quite sensitive, like your DNA information or your biometrics, are handled by companies or hospitals or any kind of institution that processes this data to produce outcomes. So let's say if a hospital will get access to a healthcare system or an AI system that could predict which patients are most likely to develop, let's say, diabetes in the next 10 years or a heart disease in the next 10 years based on the health choices or looking at an analysis of their blood right now. So how do you protect that kind of data? So I'm guessing that this project has to consider that part. So are the protections within the NDPA adequate for that. I've read the National Health Act like a while back, and I think it focused a lot more on duties of health workers, and it didn't really say a lot on protections for the health data of, not as strong as I would have wished for, strong protection for the health data of patients themselves. So I'm guessing that this kind of project you'd have to consider, yes, look at the NDPA, definitely look at the NDPR, look at the other health related law, the National Health Act, and see what protection they provide, are they adequate or not, and then probably also look at other jurisdictions where health data regulation is a lot more stronger. I don't know if this helps.
All right, thank
But
you,
yes, I'd
Mr.
be open to talking more
Akintunde.
about it.
Miss Ekene, could you?
Yeah, in addition to that, you should think about how exactly is data used in healthcare? So Akintoye has already mentioned like access, like employee access, like that's like a big concern. People misusing health privacy data. But then it's like when you look at how privacy or how patients' data is used in healthcare, it's not always, how do I put it? Like, it's not all, in some cases, yes, the doctor has to have the personal data of the person, which can be sensitive, like their blood work, you have all that. But then in many cases, on a bigger scale, they may aggregate this data, right? They don't always have to use it in the raw form, like the personal data. So privacy laws apply when you're using personal data. And then when you're not using personal data, privacy laws do not apply. And that's where something called de-identification comes in. So there are practices, techniques you can use to process personal data such that they are still useful for the purpose that you need it, whether it's in healthcare research or other analytics, so that they're still useful, but you take out the personally identifying elements of this data. But then when you de-identify data, there's also the chance of re-identifying it. So this is something that you could look into because there are actually like standards. The EU has extensive work on this, like de-identifying data, especially as it applies to healthcare, and also in like the US as well. So I don't know how deeply you're going to go into it, but just like in thinking about privacy implications of AI in healthcare, it's not just, yes, they collect all this data from patients one-on-one, but then it doesn't necessarily always it isn't always used in that direct format of this person's name, date of birth, right? All that. So I think de-identification is definitely an interesting topic for you to look at. And I don't know how much of your research is actually talking to healthcare institutions in Nigeria to get a sense of their actual use cases, right, for AI, if they have any plans for that, like in healthcare.
All right, thank you, Ekene. Thank you so much for the answers. My next question is to you, Ekene. How do you think law students as they're studying their degree can get involved in AI technologies within the legal industry? Is there something that someone that's still studying law can possibly engage in that would give him or her an edge when they are done getting their degree?
Definitely. Akintoye already mentioned a number of good resources in addition to KDIP. These are things that I believe are open to law students for the most part. They don't necessarily need you to have a degree to begin with. So I think like law students should definitely get engaged in things like that. So KDIP is an entry-level one. I've checked out the Elements of Humanity, also really entry level. There's deeplearning.ai, I believe, Professor Andrew. Yeah, so I think that taking these free classes, and when you take one, you get exposed to others because they might have a chat, they might have a community for people who have taken one course, and you'll be learning more about these things once you like get into one, for instance. So I would say like that's a good thing to do. You should take all these like certifications while you're there and also really play with the tools, like see how they're actually used. Because I find that a lot of people talk about AI without actually even engaging. Like they don't even want to like try ChatGPT, for instance, and see how it works. So when you see how it works, that could spark your curiosity and lead you down your own rabbit hole. So I would say like, yeah, like focus on your fundamental studies. And even as you're doing things in class, think about how AI, applies to this, right? Think about how AI could impacts the particular scenario you're looking at, right? Whether it's in torts and you're thinking about negligence, like you can, once you just start thinking about it from that perspective, because that's what I do now. And that's how, before getting to AI, the area I worked to break into was intellectual property. So it's like I had to put myself in that mindset of, it's not just seeing things in the news, right? It's like, oh, what are the IP rights behind this? So for instance, the Olympics starts in a week, right? A major streaming channel they've gotten a famous sports journalist. They're using his voice to create like generative AI generated recaps of the day's events. So that kind of thing is like really interesting. Like, oh, so what's going on? How are they able to, what legal rights were involved in them striking that deal? Like what science was needed or what technology, so just think about it from that perspective, even now as a student. And I feel like that would serve you really well.
I beg your pardon. Thank you, Akene, for your answer. Mr. Kintunde, would you like to contribute to the question of what steps can law students take, aside what you had earlier mentioned? Do you think there's any more that law students could do to give them an edge before they get their degree and actually feel properly into this field?
Okay, I could add I could add a bit. So building on what Ikene said about testing AI assembly, I think that is really a really important thing to know, because I can give like a personal experience I had. I don't how many of us are familiar with DAL-E? That's DALL-E. It's also from OpenAI. It's used for generating images. So there's DAL-E, there's also another one called Midjourney. And there was a time when I was trying to do some research on AI in advertising. So I wanted to see how I can use DALL-E and Midjourney to generate images. And it was like this. So there's a provision in the Nigerian Code of Advertising Practice that provides that you should not create caricatures of people. So you know how caricatures look like funny cartoons that imitate how a human being or an animal looks like. So it's a provision in the Nigerian Code of Advertising Practice. So when I tried typing a prompt into DALL-E to create a caricature of a boy drinking milk, it gave me a response that, okay, we cannot create a caricature because it might be demeaning to this person of the race and all of that. Okay, fair enough. Then I tried Midjourney and immediately it gave me the image. So it is clear that there are the restrictions on DALL-E that OpenAI put on DALL-E are far more stronger than the restrictions that are on Midjourney. So this is an interesting difference. Okay, yes, clearly, and most people who might be using this tool might just use them interchangeably without really caring about the fact that, okay, there's a difference and there's important distinction here, because if you use that image in advertising or to make a caricature of someone and the person finds it offensive, who would you hold liable here? If, okay, this company has said we cannot generate this image for you because it is demeaning, and they give a disclaimer, but this one has no disclaimer and can just go straight up to generating whatever kind of image, or whether, no matter how offensive or annoying it might be. So this is an important distinction that can help to inspire research. And okay, yes, maybe write an article that juxtaposes Midjourney and DALL-E. Which one is more privacy respecting? Which one is more compliant with maybe a certain regulation in a certain country, let's say Nigeria, for that instance. So that is one thing that I really encourage people to do, trying to test different AI systems that do the same thing to see how well they perform, to see, okay, which system would look like it's a lot more compliant or less compliant, and what are the risks involved with using each of them for whichever one you want to use. So that's one thing. And I would also like to point out that the importance of, as much as you are studying, it is also vital that you try to put out what you're studying, whichever format you're comfortable, whether it is writing articles or vlogs or podcasts or whichever medium you're comfortable with, because it is important that because not only are you building an online profile for yourself, but you're also making sure that you understand what you're reading. Because the only way to, I think the only way to know that you actually understand what you read is able to explain it to someone else. And by putting yourself out there, you also make yourself open to whether it's corrections or additional guidance and things like that could really help you. Yes.
All right, thank you very much. You had mentioned that there are some, like you mentioned that E would not generate certain images because it may be discriminatory to a certain race, but then there are some others that would do so. So does that mean in those kind of situations, is it the person that generates these images that will be held liable? Or like, how is the legal framework regarding that, particularly in Nigeria?
No, I think it would, let's say, depend on, so this context where it's started the same with advertising. So the Nigerian Code of Advertising Practice does not recognize open air as it's not subject to their regulation. They only hold the advertisers, the people who create the ad, people who use the ads. So let's say if it was Guinness and trying to use the ad, or Always or Pampers or any company that wants to generate the ad, your advertiser or advertising practitioners, the people who are like professional ad men, ad women who work in the space. So in that context now, if you are to use the outputs of DAL-E or Midjourney in your ad, because typically for you to approve an ad, it has to be approved by the advertising standards panel within the regulatory agency. So if you are to bring that ad to them, and they say, okay, this ad is offensive, they'll reject it. Or if you went to market straight without taking the ad to them and then you put it out there, the person that they will hold, the person they would impose sanctions or take to court would be you, the advertiser, or the advertising practitioner who was engaged in the contract. So in that context, yes. So I think because of it will be a lot more wiser for whoever is using these systems to understand that it is much more easier for regulators to hold you first. Before they can go to hold OpenAI, before they can go to hold Meta, you are the local person. You are the one that they can hold a lot more quickly. Even if they make them a party to the matter, you will definitely be a party to the matter. So it is up to you as the person who is using that system to be a lot more vigilant in ensuring that the systems you use are compliant. So in that context, I would advise that, okay, maybe if you wanted to use DAL-E or Midjourney for advertising, I would advise going with DAL-E because obviously it is a lot more safer for business compared to Midjourney. And even if DAL-E is safer, doesn't mean that DAL-E is foolproof. There are still ways that you can provide prompts to DAL-E that will make it to create great output that might still be offensive. So it is still up to you, the human, using these systems to understand that liability will first lie on you, and you have to ensure that you use these things in a way that does not expose you to any kind of regulatory sanctions or private matters from people who might be offended by the outputs.
All right, thank you very much. My next question is to Ekene. What do you think about the legal structure regarding technology in Nigeria compared to what it is abroad? Do you think that it is an area that is going to expand in the near future or possibly even surpass those abroad?
I think the framework because when you say what is tech law, right? It's like there's no single statute, right, that is addressing tech. And we've already established tech impacts everything. So Akintune just gave the example of advertising regulation. Like that's advertising regulation. And now it impacts AI because AI can now be used to generate advertising material. So I would say that when I think about frameworks for tech regulation, there's like individual things like the advertising, but then our laws also apply, like torts like negligence, these principles, they all still apply to technology. I would say that we don't have, when I think about tech, I think about like cyber laws, for instance, if you want something like really like tech specific, internet cyber laws, privacy, data protection laws, and to an extent IP. We have a cyber law. I'm not the biggest fan of our cybercrime, like our own act, but it mostly focuses on crime, like from the, but then it's like with everything we're seeing AI now, crime is not the big crime. It's a concern, but that's not the big issue. Like you also have regular everyday uses that we need to regulate. Like the US has, like for instance, Section 230, which protects platforms from, from content, from liability for content that is generated or posted on their content that's published on their platforms that they did not necessarily create, right? So when you go on Facebook and you post something in the US, Facebook is not liable for content that its users post on Facebook because of something like Section 230. I don't know that Nigeria has any specific exception or protection for platforms in this way. So I would say that overall frameworks for tech, we need to develop them, but it's not just in Nigeria, it's everywhere. Like the US is now trying to pass AI laws. The US is still working on its own privacy laws, right? So outside of healthcare, financial services, and to some extent, laws that impact consumer protection, the US doesn't generally have a data protection law, right, federally. So they're still working, states are now passing their individual laws, and there are challenges with that. So I would say that overall, Nigeria's tech law framework, it may not be as advanced, but then I think that's telling of the fact that, these technologies did not originate here, and we may not be as heavy users for these things in comparison to the US. So I feel like it's definitely something that needs to grow. We have our privacy. We already have our privacy. We have our privacy NDPA now, before that, the NDPR. So I think we're on it. I think it's growing. I don't think it's a contest in terms of surpassing anybody. But yeah, I don't feel like we're any bad spot.
All right, thank you. But to follow up on that question, what would you say about the technology that lawyers are currently using to deliver legal services in Nigeria? Is it something that could use some improvement, or as it is at the moment, is it fit for the services that they deliver, or is there some improvement that needs to be done?
I feel like it just depends on each firm and how they do business. The clients don't necessarily care about the tools that you're using. At BNI, because that was my last firm in Nigeria, we had some technology that was made for the firm that we used to use to do certain things. That's what worked for us. In previous firms, we weren't using, apart from Microsoft Word, Microsoft Office, the things you need to get your job done. So I feel like the tech stack of any law firm, it's really up to them. I don't think anybody has to use generative AI, to serve their clients. There are other ethical and professional responsibility obligations that go with that. But it's not a topic that I personally I'm very invested in. It just depends on the firm and how they want to do business. Would it be better for their clients if they generate templates with generative AI? I don't know. And even in my present role, working as an AI law firm, we do not use AI tools to, optimize our work. So I think it's up to the firm.
All right, thank you. Mr. Akintunde, I would throw the same question at you. Do you think that the technology being used right now to deliver legal services in the country is, as it is, do you think that it's something that should be peculiar, or would you encourage firms to utilize AI generated templates, or it's really whatever they deem fits? What would you?
Okay, yeah. So I think first thing we need to note is that let's say the legal tech space, for AI tools like that in Nigeria is not as developed as the US market or the UK market. So we don't have tools that are as complex as what they have over there. That's one thing. We have some here, and what we have are mostly restricted to things related to maybe search, database to access cases, or I think there's one that I've been testing is near to go into market that has to do with helping to develop contracts, the developer is connected to ChatGPT. Connected to GPT-3 rather, GPT-3 or GPT-4. I'm not sure which one he uses, but he has access to their database to use it to generate any kind of contract that you want, and he wants to roll that out into the Nigerian legal marketplace. So I say that it is a growing market, but it is not, I would say that it is not the biggest concern right now, because I would say that I think I would say that maybe AI in finance is a lot more critical, or there are a lot more risks there compared to a lot more risks. There are a lot more risks, and there are a lot more things that we should be aware of. Because I mean, you could use AI to assess whether a person is credit worthy or not. You use AI to access for financial fraud, to detect it, or even to hack accounts. It has happened before. So I would say that the legal tech space when it comes to AI deployment is still, would I say, still largely nascent. There's room for growth there, but it is not, I think it is a lot more important that before we encourage full-scale adoption of AI tools in legal practice, we need to take note of the ethical responsibilities. I know that the NBA, I think it was earlier this year, put out like some draft guidelines on use of AI and data protection. It's not yet been approved. I don't know why they're taking a lot of time, but they put out some draft guidelines for asking lawyers to provide comments on those guidelines. So I think that's the good place to start from. So the NBA putting out these kinds of guidelines for lawyers for how to use AI and how to handle matters of data protection. And then if these things are out there and we have this kind of framework to guide how lawyers can conduct themselves using these AI tools, then we then have like a legal basis for, okay, educating ourselves on this, and so that when we eventually start adopting these tools en masse, because people are already using them already, but it's not yet like they are not fully taking over the profession, but at least at that time, we have like a strong legal or ethical backing to ethical framework that backs up our use of these things to ensure that we use them ethically, responsibly, without divulging client information. Because I mean, I wouldn't want a situation where you are using a generative AI tool and then you are providing commercial client information. Although many of them say that they don't use the data that you use to train their models, but like I said, it is the same rule may not apply for every single AI service provider. We can't say that if it works for this one, that means every other person is doing the same thing. So I think that summarily it boils down to we within the legal profession understanding the ethical issues in place around these things. And like I said, hopefully the NBA brings out approves the guidelines they were working on earlier this year, and we can have a conversation based on that.
All right, thank you. We have a question from one of our attendees. And the question is for Ms. Ekene. I beg your pardon, Ekene. The question is, what key skills from your previous roles would you say you used in getting a role as a lawyer in artificial intelligence, and how would you say it helped you?
Hi, Nana. So yes, great question. I would say when I think about, like, before I set out to be an AI lawyer or a lawyer in AI, it's like first I was on a journey to be a tech lawyer, right? So the core competencies that I set out to build, in addition to just, general like legal fundamentals. So I'll say like intellectual property law, understanding that, privacy law, and then just generally like internet, cyber laws, and some familiarity with technology. So I'll say like all these skills like helped, even if I don't use them all like in my role. So like IP, as Akintade mentioned earlier, like it's probably the hottest issue right now with generative AI. So that has definitely like given me backing to, approach these issues. And that's really where I would say I anchor myself, the AI in IP or the IP in AI. Then privacy, because AI is built on big data, like that's really what is built on. So privacy laws, and then when personal data is not involved, like data governance generally, understanding that here in the US or wherever it is you are, like understanding internet law, cyber laws, since they do have that. And I would say some familiarity with technology. So we already, talked about tinkering with the tools ourselves and getting to know the difference between them and thinking about how they work. And then it's also, I guess, working with tech clients previously, understanding how their technology works. So in my previous role, like at BNI, like having to liaise with regulators on behalf of people, for instance, that wanted specific like telecommunications licenses, just being able to understand what they were trying to do and break it down to the regulator, help them understand just that familiarity with technology or the comforts, like being comfortable with getting uncomfortable with it, even if you don't fully understand it, just dealing with that technicality and that complexity. And then I guess another thing that helped in getting the specific role, while I was in grad school, we had to build products, and the product my team and I decided to build was an e-discovery product that was enhanced by AI. So just this was in January 2023, when everybody felt like ChatGPT had like 10,000 use cases and there was so much out there. So going through that process of testing different things, researching with people in the legal tech community, and then coming up with our product, which was very simple. It was really just that we felt that it would be helpful that when people are searching through tons of documents during e-discovery, it would be helpful if they just had a thumbnail of sorts that would just read through a document and summarize it in a line or two, so that it would influence the person's decision of how they would prioritize like opening that document or not. It might seem very simple, very basic, and I didn't understand at the time why we got good feedback for it. But after working in AI in the last year, it's like I've realized that summarization is one of ChatGPT or generative AI's strongest use cases, right? And just going through that process iteratively by ourselves helped us see what was possible and what was not. Search isn't great, but summarization, for instance, like isn't bad. So I would say like altogether, those skills of like IP, privacy, internet, cyber generally, and then just familiarity or willing to get comfortable with technology.
All right, thank you very much. We have another question from one of our participants. I would firstly direct it to Mr. Akintunde and then come back to you, Ekene, for your response. Emmanuel has stated that he is a professional photo retoucher and he uses Adobe Photoshop. There are times when he uses the generative field to improve his work. So as one who has the copyright of the image, but has used generative field on the picture, does it affect the ownership of the work in any way from a legal point of view?
So he's saying that he is a professional photo retoucher. So he's one who took the pictures, or just trying to understand how that works. But if it's the case that the pictures were taken by him, or pictures that he took, and he's using generative AI to maybe make improvements, maybe to lighting or darken or contrast or any or stuff like that, it does not affect his copyright if that is simply what he's simply using it to make improvements to it. So generally, that doesn't impair on his copyrights over these images. It might have been a bit of a debate, a bit of a question if these images were generated in the first place using generative AI, or if it was the case that the images were generated using like maybe generated using generative AI, and he was then using his own effort to then make improvements or edits to this, and that's where I think it gets a bit murky. But typically, if it's just your own image, your own picture, your own pictures that you created, that you took, and you're simply using generative AI features to make edits to it, it wouldn't impair on your copyright.
Betty, you're mute.
Yes, beg your pardon. Thank you very much, Mr. Akintunde, for your response. Ekene, do you have anything to add to that in relation to Emmanuel's question?
I guess I'm curious about how the generative fill you're talking about works. I don't use Photoshop, but Photoshop is a tool that photographers have used for years, for decades now, and their copyright is still intact. So as Akintade said, like if you created the original work and then you use this generative fill, I think from I guess the Copyright Act perspective, depending on what the generative field does, if it really does so much, maybe it could be seen as creating a derivative work of your but you own the copyright anyway. So I don't really see any issues there. But then if you were, as he said, if you were using a prompt to generate it, then the question is how much of this is you and how much of this is the generative AI. And so far, at least in the US, the standard is no, you would have to disclaim the parts that you created with generative AI. So yeah.
Right, thank you very much. Emmanuel, I believe that our panelists have adequately answered the question. The next question I have is directed to you, Ekene. Do you believe that the
I'm going upstairs
um,
to do statistics.
do you
No,
believe that
ask
the
her
AI field
She, I
is
don't
a
think
lucrative
people
industry, or is it just something that is
today.
presumed because there's a lot of
Ask
talk
her.
about
She
how
created she
lucrative
created
this
an agenda.
industry is because it's tech-based and it will continue to grow, sort of like how oil was in Nigeria for quite a number of years? Do you think that that is how technology is to the world now?
So who's staying for you?
Can
Ma
you
or
mute
Carmen?
yourself?
Ma is staying, right? Yeah. Okay, so Carmen, let's give it up for her. She comes back. Then break out. No,
Okay. I apologize for the interruption. Someone is working on sorting that out.
Okay, I will just hope that you guys can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, I think AI is impactful technology and it's here to stay. Akinsune has been working on it for years now and is literally tracking that evolution. When he got into it, it wasn't, in front of everyone. It was still more on the back end, enhancing things. And now it's accessible to us. That's what has changed. That AI is now part of the actual consumer experience in using a product. So I feel like it's impactful technology for sure. It's like if you look at the history of AI, there have been AI summers, AI winters, and right now we're definitely an AI summer where there's big boom, lots of heavy investments in AI. But then when you also look at if you're also closely following news on this, it's like these generative AI tools, they're fun, but they also cost a lot of compute right now to run. And there's also the environmental effect. There's so much, they consume compute, they consume a lot of energy, water, it requires a lot. So the jury is still out on, they're technically not broken even, right? So these tools that are available for us or available to us, they are not profitable centers right now for the companies that are providing them, so it's I would say depending on how you're looking at it, generative AI, if somebody was looking at AI from a VC standpoint, as a venture capitalist or venture capital lawyer, I mean, I wouldn't be so confident because again, these things come in cycles. But in terms of AI being a part of our lives, definitely, I think in every industry, whether it is even in law, music, we all have this sense that this is a watershed moment. This is something really big. So I think that everyone should have a handle on AI because it affects us one-on-one, individually as individuals, and then also it's going to impact our practice areas. I don't know that AI is going to be some massive money maker in the future, for everybody that everybody should delve into. But I believe that it's important to ride different technology cycles. Previously it was blockchain, right? That everyone was talking about. I mean, I think blockchain can still be useful, but if somebody was involved in blockchain, they still have those skills as an emerging technologies attorney to take forward into the next thing. We're talking about AI, next thing people are talking about quantum. if you're working in AI and you're thinking about this technology, you're going to be in a better position to leap to the next. Well, not that you're leaving AI behind. You're going to be in a better position to adapt, I believe, as we're riding with the wave. So I basically can't sit here and tell you that you should try to be an AI lawyer for sure, if that's not what you want. But I definitely think that it's worth making that investment in your learning because it's going to impact everything. If you're going to be in financial services, they are going to be using AI in financial services. So you need to understand that. If you're going to work in employment, discrimination, those issues are really rife in employment law. And with companies using AI tools to screen applicants, so you're going to understand AI as relates to that. So I really don't think of AI as this one big thing. I feel like it feels big now, but it's eventually going to become something that we're all going to have to understand on some level to, to cover all bases and thrive in our careers.
All right, thank you very much, Ekene. Mr. Akintunde, I would direct the same question at you. In your view, considering the fact that you have worked in this space for a while now, do you think that this particular field is a lucrative one? Yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So I would say that the AI, for anyone who wants to get into it, you have to treat it like a long bet, like you're trying to play the long game. So in the sense that it is you're not going to start seeing yield in terms of let's say maybe getting a job in it in the first or the second year. Maybe you might be lucky, you could, but anything is happening, anything is possible. But you should be able to look at it from the long game. Okay, I'm playing this to really see how far I can take this. And Ekene was right, AI tends to move in winters. I mean, this is not the first time there's been an AI boom. AI has been with us since the 1950s, 1960s. And there were booms and then there were bust cycles where just technology went down. You come back again and then to go down again. Then we're in the current, like we're in the longest boom so far. But like I said, issues around compute power, the energy that it consumes, how eco-friendly is its continued use, might be things that in the future might trigger maybe another down cycle for AI if we don't find a way to reduce the costs or the power constraints for using AI. I think blockchain had a similar issue back then, like the cost of powering the GPUs for mining was something that really forced some countries to crack down on its mining. So it's something that AI might start having that kind of issue and force people to like start scaling back their investments, which might then trigger a downturn for the industry. But besides that, I think of AI as a general purpose technology. So the way at least in most parts of the world, people take electricity for granted, maybe not in Nigeria, but at least for most parts of the world, people take electricity for granted. But there was a time when electricity was a novel thing. It was this new thing that it had these limitless possibilities. But now we just take it as it's just something that's there. So I think that in the future, AI will be something that is just so intertwined to everything we do that we won't think of AI anymore. It will just be a feature that is part of every other thing. And it has that kind of long-term prospect. So it's something that it's a field that even if it goes through booms and busts and booms and busts, it will still be with us for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years in a more integrated form that we hardly will think of. Because we don't think of, let me see now, we don't think of what's kind of an old AI technology now that we don't really think of. Let's say something as basic as Google search now is AI. It's been with us for like the early 2000s, but it doesn't really feel like AI. We take it for granted. We think of things like ChatGPT as being more AI. But in the next 10, 20 years now, ChatGPT will probably, if it's still with us, will look like it's so old and this is mundane, this is an everyday thing. And whatever is the new buzz in the next 10, 20 years will feel like the new AI. So it will constantly give us new innovation. So it is vital that for anyone who wants to get into this space, it is vital that you have an open mind to constantly learn because this field is really fast paced, honestly speaking. At times I find it hard to keep up where there's a new position paper from one regulator somewhere, there's a new experiment somewhere. So it can be overwhelming sometimes, but you need to just try to intentionally keep track of what is happening so that you are able to understand what direction is it going. And also try, I think one way that kind of can be helpful there is to, what I do is that I use Google Alerts. It makes things a bit easier. Another thing that I'm doing is that try to track certain, if let's say, I think what can make it a bit easier for anyone would be to, if you have a certain area of law that you are already interested in, be it IP, be it consumer protection, it would be good to maybe use that as a starting point for getting into AI. So I like IP is like the best field I can use for as an example. Just this, was it last week? I think it was last week that WIPO does this in every year where they have like global awards where anyone who is using emerging technologies in an innovative way in their, for SMEs, they issue awards to them and monetary prize and all of that. So there were 9 recipients for this year's awards, and like 5 of them are using AI in their services. You can check the WIPO, just Google WIPO Global Awards 2024. You see the winners and the details of the entire competition. Last week, the EPO had something like that. The European Patent Office had their own award. So you know that if you follow these kinds of major IP regulators, whether it's WIPO or EPO, you know, look, yes, these are the major innovations that people are investing in terms of how to use AI for IP related issues. Another thing that I would also say that could be helpful is to what's the word now? Um I'm sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought. Maybe I'll get back if I get it back, I would come back.
All right, thank you very much. Our final question to wrap up the panel session. Ms. Ekene, starting with you, what is the toughest part of working in the AI space, and what is the most exciting thing about working in this area?
I think the toughest part, which you already said, is keeping up because there's so much going on. Like towards the end of 2023, there were so many countries, like the UK had convened that Bletchley Summit. Like there's just so much going on. So I feel like that's the hardest part. It can feel very dizzying, keeping up with the law as well as the technical capabilities, because a lot of AI companies, like they publish, or AI research is being published. So it's not just the laws that are news. When there's a new process or some new technique, like think lately now is a mixture of experts. Like when there's like some new breakthrough or something for people to be excited about, like, a technical paper is published and then everybody tries to get on top of that. So I would say like keeping up with everything is the hardest part. And then conversely, on the other side of that, it is also just the fact that it's like I'm learning. Like it's great to be in a field that is new and it's not just the same and it's not just boring. So it's really exciting to to learn in terms of I would say like the day-to-day, because also like in my work, it's not just one particular thing every day. It's different things. And I feel like I really enjoy being able to just give like practical, like strategic advice to clients. So sometimes it's like, okay, how do we communicate our product features, right? And be transparent about it. Or I would say something I really enjoy is maybe like helping people like develop like not just policies, like training guides, because you have the technical people working on it, and then you also have the legal team and people who are trying to like make sure risk is managed. So basically being able to like help both sides communicate, like creating documentation that lets the technical people know this is why we're thinking about risk in this way, like this is how we're thinking about it. And then also just being able to just communicate the technical aspects as well to, legal folks. So I'd say that's like one part of the work that I really enjoy.
Right, thank you very much. Mr. Akitunde, I would throw the same question at you. What is the toughest part about working in this space, and what is the most exciting thing about it as well for you?
Okay, thank you. So before I go into that, I think I remember what I was trying to say before. So I was trying to remember something that WIPO does. So WIPO does this thing, I think they do it 3 times a year. They call it the Frontier WIPO, this WIPO conversations, the WIPO conversations on IP. So for I think like the previous like two most since like 2 3 sessions now, they've been focused on generative AI and IP. So I think that's a really good place for anyone who is interested in IP and AI to join those sessions as a participant, because you will have speakers from all over the world talking about how AI is impacting IP, whether the administration of IP, how they are regulating IP, how it's being adopted in products, how it's affecting their copyright laws, their patent laws, and all of that. So you get like real-time perspectives from different countries, from private sector, public sector, on how AI is impacting that field. So following WIPO, following the EPO, these are like major agencies that are really interested in AI and IP. So someone who has that background in IP, so those are two people that I think, two agencies rather, that you should really take note of. So to the question, what is most challenging and what is most exciting? Okay, what's most exciting for me is the fact that it's like a brave new world, really. There are no it's for me it feels sometimes it feels like the wild wild west, where you are like an early frontier and you are an early explorer, and you get the opportunity, like you actually do get the opportunity to, if you put yourself out there and you build your competence, you actually get a chance in AI to be in the room where people are making decisions about how do we adopt this, how do we regulate these things. I don't think you get that kind of opportunity in other established fields. Oil and gas, maritime, IP, taxation, the rules are already been set. Everything is already in black and white. You just have to take it and apply. There might be new issues that come up once in a while, but by and large, it's largely set in its ways. But with AI and even other emerging tech areas, the rules haven't been set. We are still debating them globally. So the EU has its AI Act. So other countries will start adopting similar laws, but it is still a whole new space that you can really contribute a voice here. And there are no, I feel like there are no ceilings to how far anyone can go in this field, because there are no hierarchies yet. It is simply how fast can you go, how quickly can you move, how quickly can you develop yourself. You can go as fast or as slow as you want. That's what I think is the most exciting thing about AI, that you can determine your pace in this field, and you really have an opportunity to really contribute to shaping what AI is. As a lawyer, from the regulatory perspective, I know I've had opportunities like that in the past, like working on the national AI policy last year and through the fellowships that I'm currently working on. So a real opportunity to like really contribute to the policy side of things. Then the most challenging thing, like it's has to be keeping up, really, because this field is really fast paced. So I think what has helped me is that I have been able to kind of narrow my focus, because when I started, I was like trying to study everything. There was a time when I was even trying to learn how to code, but I quickly gave up on that at that point. I felt, okay, this is not for me at all. But I was trying to do everything, trying to try my hands in coding, reading the technical aspect of things. Although I should actually note that I'm not saying you are not going to, I'm not saying that you have to learn how to code, but I think it is actually very useful for we as lawyers to try to understand what the technical terms mean. Because take, for instance, now, we have something called federated learning, and we have supervised and supervised learning. And if a client comes to you and mentions that, okay, my model was trained using federated learning, it's an important difference to note, because it tells me that, okay, a system built using federated learning is a bit more privacy protecting than a system built using typical mainstream supervised and supervised learning. So you don't need to learn how to build a federated learning model, but knowing what these terms mean, deep learning, reinforcement, neural networks, knowing what they mean helps you to better understand when the developers are speaking that, okay, yes, when people from DeepMind, people from OpenAI are writing papers, publishing papers about explaining how their systems work, if you understand what those terms mean, it's easier for you to derive meaning from them and then look at, okay, yes, what are the legal implications of these things? So that's something that you don't have, you should at least try to understand what they mean at the basic level. And then going back to like, so it's useful to, at least currently right now, I think I've kind of narrowed my focus down to mainly AI policy and then the data protection side of things, because those are the things that at least I interact with more frequently, data protection and the policy side of things, and then sometimes consumer protection. So that is like, so that way I don't get overwhelmed, because if I try to track every single aspect of AI, I won't achieve anything honestly, and I would just probably just give up. So you can start broadly if you are not really sure where you want to focus on, but eventually you would find, okay, maybe I think I find this particular subset a lot more appealing, or maybe I think I understand this field a lot more better than this. So it helps to conserve your strength so that you can really build up your competence a lot more quickly and a lot more rapidly within that subdomain. Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Akintini. Thank you, Ekene, for joining us for this career seminar. Thank you. The panel session was very impactful, and I am certain that it was impactful for all our attendees and participants as well. We have come to the end of the panel session. Thank you once again.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure joining.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ekene. Thank you, Mr. Kingsley, and thank you, Betty, for moderating the session. Now we'll be moving on to the break session where we've had questions for our moderator, for our panelists rather, and now we'll have questions for the participants who have been here so far. First, this is going to be divided into two sessions. The first is going to be general knowledge on international law practice, and secondly, we have questions on what our panelists have said so far to be sure that everyone has learned one or two things. And my colleagues, it's going to be in a point-based system. And my colleagues would be in the comment section looking at whoever gets the answers to these questions first. Afterwards, the person with the highest number of points gets a certificate of excellence from the center. We'll begin with general knowledge question. And our first question will be, when was the ICC, which is the International Criminal Court, when was it created? Any takers? No, I meant when, a date, not where is it located, when was it created? No one? Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for that answer. So our next question, we have, where is the ICC situated? What city, what country? Thank you so much, Robert. And also our next question, how many members of the Security Council are there? How many permanent members? How many temporary members? Thank you, Robert, for getting the number of permanent members. However, we still have left the number of temporary members. Does anyone know the answer to that? Thank you so much, Rebecca. On to our next question, our next general question. How many main organs does the United Nations have? Do we have any takers? Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Now, for our next question, who is the current Secretary General of the UN, of the United Nations? The current Secretary General. Thank you so much, Robert, for answering that question correctly. Also, our last question for the general knowledge question. How many cases have been instituted at the ICC? If you know the answer to that, please write it down in the comment section, in the chat box. Number of cases that have been instituted at the ICC. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for getting the answer to that. Now move on to the questions from the panel sessions themselves. We want to be sure that everyone learns a thing or two. Now, from the first panel session, the fintech session, one of our speakers mentioned some agreements. He listed out some agreements which fintech lawyers have to draft. He mentioned about 2, 3 agreements. If you know either of them, you can write that down in the chat box, please. Thank you, Emmanuel. We have one more to go. We still have one left. Do we have any takers? No, we only have one correct answer so far. We still have one left. The agreements that they have to draft. Anyone? Okay, it seems no one got the second one. So the first one he mentioned was the Payments Gateway Agreement, and the second is the Merchant Acquirers Agreement. So now move on to the next question. One of our speakers, still on the fintech session, mentioned a regulation that regulates cryptocurrency. Who got that? You don't have to give the full meaning, just the acronym is fine. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for getting the answer to that question. Now, on to our next question. We have, during the data protection session, one of our panelists mentioned a privacy regulation that regulates data privacy laws, or data privacy regulation rather. Did anyone get that? And what states does that regulation apply to? Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you. Oh, okay. Thank you so much, everyone. It seems everyone got that quite clearly. On to our next question. One of our speakers made sure to mention that the NDPA has just the law, but the other regulations do have something that explains the applicability of the law. Does anyone remember what she called that section? Section of the law that explains the applicability of the law. Yeah, Robert, you're quite close, but she gave it a name. There was something she called it that was quite very specific. Does anyone remember that? Oh, no, no one yet. Nope. So it seems no one got what she said. So she mentioned that although the NDPR does have an implementation, it does not have an implementation framework yet, as in attached to the NDPR yet. Other laws such as the GDPR and other privacy regulations laws do have something called recitals, which explains how the law is to be how the law came to be and how it's to be applied. Yes. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. On to our next question. One of our data protection speakers did give she gave the name of someone that should be followed if you like to be if you like to be knowledge if you like to get access to data protection events. Did anyone get the person's name? A lawyer who doubles as who you could call in quotes a data protection influencer. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca. Now, on to back to our artificial intelligence session, which we just concluded. Our panelists gave some tools that will be useful to gain knowledge about AI. They mentioned about 4 tools. If you know any of this, please write that down in chat box. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Robert. We have one more to go. Do we have any more answers coming in? So it seems we don't. Mr. Kinsley mentioned that he used when he was starting up in AI, he used a tool called Midjourney. That was where he talked about different tools and how some restrict what is the information that they give out and how others not give any restrictions. And finally, to our last question, Ms. Ekene mentioned a particular law and a particular section that protects certain communities, online communities like Facebook, that protects them from things that their users post on them. Does anyone remember the section and the law, or the law and the section rather? Thank you, Jacinta. Thank you, Israel. Yes, thank you so much, Robert. Section 230 of the US Privacy Law. And that brings me to the end of this session. I will now pass the mic to the hosts, Esther.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can, Esther.
Thank you for attending the 2024 career seminar. We're very grateful. Thank you for staying up to this moment. Thank you for all your reactions and the questions you've asked our audience, our panelists. Thank you very much. And I hope you had a great time and also you've gained insights on how to start your careers in data protection, artificial intelligence, and fintech session. We'll get back to the winners of the quiz competition very soon. And also, the documents the speakers promised to send, we'll send them as soon as possible once we get them. Thank you very much. We've come to the end of the career seminar. Thank you. We can all leave now.
All right, can Adebayo Mubarak please leave the call? Can one of the hosts please remove Adebayo Mubarak from the call, from the meeting? All right, thank you very much. It's been a very wonderful session, and I believe you all learned one or two things from what the speakers or the panelists said during their discussions on the various fields that we examined during this career seminar. It's been a wonderful one. I want to say a very big thank you to the team, the career seminar committee. They did a very wonderful, wonderful job. So well done to all of you, and I believe you can now at least, sit back and take some rest, because I believe you've been working a lot in the last few weeks, trying to get everything in place for this seminar. So if there is any other thing to be said regarding any of the sessions or regarding, one or two things that we need to improve on in future, um, I will discuss this with Esther, and I believe Esther will be able to discuss with the committee members. So thank you once again, and it's what time now? It should be around 3 p.m. now. So enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll resume on Monday.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
All
sir.
right.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Yeah, bye.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Can you hear me?